Warrior Lore. Chapter 29-27. As long as you think it's okay. Elder Wu nodded. Then he looked at the door of the hall and said, Li Zongbao from the Utopia faction is not doing well in his cultivation. When you go back, ask him to cultivate more. It's better for him to ask for help from his own faction. Yes, I know. It's all my fault. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. This was the second soul cultivator besides Master Qin Qin who had mentioned this to him. Of course, Elder Wu wouldn't help Li Zongbao for no reason, although he could ask Elder Wu for help. However, Elder Wu had made it clear that Li Zongbao could ask for help from the Utopia faction. Elder Wu wasn't proficient in Taoist magic, so he might not be able to do the best job. Then Xiao Hua told Elder Wu about Li Zongbao's situation. However, Elder Wu didn't pay much attention to it. After hearing that, he didn't say anything. Instead, he asked Ziming and the others to come in. Fairy Hong Xia's face was filled with worry as she followed closely behind Ziming into the palace. However, when she saw the smile on Xiao Hua's face instead of the worry she had expected, her heart immediately settled down and she couldn't help but smile. Of course, Ziming, who was leading the way, was also worried. His reaction was similar to Fairy Hong Xia's. However, when Ziming smiled, he glanced at Fairy Hong Xia secretly. Ziming, Elder Wu's expression became calm again. Now that everything in the Huda village is settled, I should worry about you. You can take a bath and meditate. I'll ask G-Man to issue a wizard order to summon all wizard elders of the Huta village. In addition, I'll invite the wizard elders of the 11 main villages, including the Shibai village, to come and observe the ceremony after 81 days. To celebrate your burning lamp ceremony. Ziming's eyebrows were filled with joy. He bowed and said, Thank you very much, Elder Wu. Alas, you've been so thoughtful since you were young. You've worked so hard for this. I also hope you can understand the magic of the soul-falling lamp and restore the prosperity of the descendants of the Huta god in the Huta village. Yes, the boy will definitely rack his brains. Ziming replied while lying on the ground. Go, bring little friend Xiao and the others down. The burning lamp ceremony is not only a celebration of Hutu stronghold, but also a rare grand event in Ming Mountains. Besides, this grand event will definitely be recorded in the Magus Codex. It is the beginning of a new era for Ming Mountains. Grandmaster Wu waved his hand and said, Yes, the boy knows. Although Ziming already knew that this would happen, he still couldn't help but be overjoyed when he heard it from Elder Wu. After all, Ming Mountains was in a critical moment of life and death. With Xiao Hua's seed, Ming Mountains could finally return from death to life. This milestone must be recorded in the Magus Codex and be worshipped by the trillions of people in Ming Mountains, and be revered by future generations. And this milestone was his own burning lamp ceremony. This was definitely a supreme honor, an opportunity that could only be found by chance. Ziming stood up and left with Xiao Hua and the others. When there was no one else in the hall, Grandmaster Wu sighed. This sigh carried a sense of helplessness, but at the same time, it also carried a sense of joy after a disaster. Then, Grandmaster Wu muttered to himself doubtfully, This Xiao Hua is a Confucian cultivator? Nowadays, Confucian cultivators have long been extinct in Xiaoyu continent. Only a few of them are left in Ming Mountains. Where did he come from? If he is a Confucian cultivator, then how did he cultivate his demigod body? I've never heard of a Confucian cultivator having the body of a sage. While thinking, Grandmaster Wu raised his head and looked at the door of the hall. G-Man slowly walked in. When she got closer, she bowed and said, Grandmaster Wu, I've ordered all soul warriors to withdraw from Sword Domain. I've also reported this to Grandmaster Wu of Shebi Village. Yes, we've been attacking Sword Domain for so many years. Although we've occupied a lot of territory, it's of no use to solve the crisis of Ming Mountains. We've lost a lot of our people. It's really not worth it. Grandmaster Wu nodded and said, We have no other choice. G-Man also sighed. We can't just do nothing, right? Although attacking Sword Domain is of no use, our people have seen our efforts. There won't be any chaos. When we attacked Sword Domain, the swordsmen of Sword Domain were forced to attack the 3 cultivation kingdoms. Grandmaster Wu said again, The Great War of Tao and Sword has been going on for so many years. Presumably, when the Taoist cultivators weren't on guard, the swordsmen also occupied a lot of territory, right? That should be the case. G-Man nodded. But what exactly does it have to do with us? Since we've withdrawn from Sword Domain, the Great War of Tao and Sword should be over by now? Grandmaster Wu's starry eyes flashed with a strange light. However, the territory occupied by the swordsmen, I'm afraid they won't just give it to cultivators. That's for sure. G-Man said with a smile. Humans are insatiable. They want more after getting it. Although Ming Mountains is no longer a threat to them and they won't lose Sword Domain, do you think the swordsmen will give up what they got? I don't think it's possible. There's no need to talk about the matters of outsiders. Grandmaster Wu waved his hand and asked again. This time, our Huta stockade was in danger. I didn't expect the demon dwellers to spend so much effort. Not only were the descendants of the main stockade possessed, even the descendants of the upper stockade like Jing Apple Stockade were possessed. If Zimming didn't find out, I'm afraid that even if we got the seed, it would be a gift to the demon dwellers. Yes, it's all my fault. I'm willing to take responsibility. G-Man bit her lips and didn't refute. There's no need to talk about taking responsibility now. Grandmaster Wu waved his hand. Ming Mountain's disaster hasn't been completely overcome yet. Not to mention that the upper stockade's 99 shaman stockades and the lower stockade's 360 shaman stockades haven't started yet. Why are you bringing this up? However, you and Zimming still have to. It's all my fault. G-Man lowered her head and admitted, when I heard that Xian was killed by Zimming, I was immediately enraged. Not only did I capture Zimming, young Master Xiao, and the others, I also wanted to kill them. Especially Sai. I've insulted the previous G-Man with my words. I'm afraid Zimming can't forgive me for this. Grandmaster Wu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Although he was the stockade master, he could only scratch his head when it came to the family matters of the stockade. Look for an opportunity. Take it slow. Grandmaster Wu said again. Zimming isn't an unreasonable person. Although she's greedy for power and wants to break free from your control, she's not disloyal to the Huta stockade. G-Man's face was also filled with helplessness. Yes, she still has a rejuvenation pill. Before G-Man could finish speaking, Elder Wu interrupted her. Let's not talk about her. Even I have my own thoughts about this. Actually, if it were you, would you give this rejuvenation pill to her? G-Man didn't say anything and only shook her head slightly. All right, the selfish desires of humans aren't scary. Without selfish desires, one would be a great deity. We don't have to worry about our own selfish desires, and we don't have to worry about the selfish desires of others. Under the protection of the great deity, all selfish desires will be used by the great deity and become the driving force for the growth of Ming Mountains. Grandmaster Wu waved his hand. If it weren't for Zimming's selfish desires, how could Zimming know Xiaohua? Without Xiaohua, how could Ming Mountains get out of this predicament? Yes, you're right, Grandmaster Wu. G-Man nodded respectfully. Go and make the arrangements. In 81 days, the burning lamp ceremony will be held in the Huta Hall. My Huta stockade, you, me, and Zimming will all be recorded in the Magus Codex and become the most important stroke in the Magus Codex to be worshipped by the future generations. Yes, I understand. G-Man bowed respectfully, then slowly left the hall. While Grandmaster Wu of the Huta Stockade and G-Man were discussing how to record their names in the Magus Codex for the future generations to worship, far away, between the icebergs that bordered the Huan country and the Shi country, on top of the Green Lake, there were also a few sword cultivators discussing how to record their names in the history. Lake Chui was still Lake Chui, and the tranquil lake water was still as calm as ever, as if it was a huge piece of jade. However, at this moment, standing on top of Lake Chui was no longer LV Ruochang and the other sword cultivators, nor were they those weapon cultivators or beast cultivators. Instead, it was a dozen old men dressed in sword armor. These old men just stood quietly in midair, and each of them had a faint sword glow flashing around their bodies. These sword glows were of different colors, and they came from the top of the old men's heads. Some of them flowed down like ripples, spreading to the bottom of their feet in an instant, then turning around and rushing up to the top of their heads again. Some of them were thin serpents that came from the top of their heads, spiraling down around the old men's bodies. When they reached the bottom of their feet, they turned around in a strange manner, not stopping at all as they rushed up to the top of their heads again. Some of them gushed out like fountains, like waterfalls falling down on their bodies. When their bodies were full, these waterfalls gushed out from the bottom of their feet and rushed up to the top of their heads again. However, no matter what color these sword glows came from, after rushing up to the top of their heads, they all disappeared into the top of the old men's heads. As the sword glows disappeared, the old men's bodies trembled slightly, and a faintly discernible huge sword flashed out from their bodies. Rays of sword energy that seemed to be able to split open the blue sky rushed out, and then strangely disappeared in midair. Wang, suddenly, an ear-piercing sword cry came from outside of Lake Chui. Immediately, all of the sword lights above Lake Chui brightened. However, these sword lights disappeared in a flash. Even though the calm Lake Chui had tens of thousands of deep watermarks, the entire Lake Chui was in a state of chaos. However, the sword lights around the 10 old men had disappeared. They were no different from the old men of the secular world. When the old men looked at the only opening in Lake Chui, they saw a rainbow of sword glows piercing through the hurricane and into the sky above Lake Chui. When the sword glows slowly disappeared, a slender, huge sword was revealed. Before anyone could take a closer look, the huge sword trembled rapidly, and a tall and thin old man appeared from the huge sword. -11. Chapter 29-28. The old man's face was long and narrow, and his arched eyebrows were stuck to the corners of his eyes. He looked like he was in dire straits, but at this moment, there was a trace of a smile on the old man's face, and his arched eyebrows were slightly trembling. The old man appeared to the left of a red-faced old man. If Xiaohua was here, he would definitely recognize him. This was the third-grade swordsman he met after saving Xiao Mao from the Two Springs Mountain. Moreover, it was this person who issued the sword master command at the sword tomb and ordered the swordsmen of the Huan country to stop Xiaohua's group. He was the sword master of the Void Heaven Sword School, Chong Taishu. Chong Taishu saw the old man's happy expression and the corners of his mouth curled up. He said, "Swordmaster Ruo, is the Supreme Harmony Azure Light Sword a success?" This so-called Sword Master Ruo was the sword master of the skyscraping sword school, Ruo Tian. When Ruo Tian heard Chong Taishu's words, he swept his gaze across the crowd and met the gazes directed at him. He extended his hand, and a thread of fire suddenly appeared in his empty hand. This thread of fire flickered rapidly in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, a slender long sword with endless fire runes on it appeared in Ruo Tian's hand. Following the appearance of this sword, an indescribable heat covered the sky above Lake Chui and enveloped all the old men. "Ha ha 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 ha, take a look at my Supreme Harmony Azure Light Sword." Chong Taishu laughed heartily and raised his hand as well. A wisp of watery light appeared in his empty hand. Then, boundless blue waves rippled out from the watery light. Like a whirlwind, they rushed towards the incoming heat. At the same time, a blue flying sword appeared in his hand. This flying sword was the one Xiaohua saw in the Yinyang Spring Mountain. Not bad, not bad. Then I'll let all the sword masters see my Supreme Harmony Azure Light Sword. Cheng Minghua from the Clear Sword sect laughed when he saw this. He waved his hand, and something that looked like a withered branch flew out from his hand. Then, a cyan sword light surged out from the branch. The withered branch glowed with a green light, and sprouts grew out from it. When the sprouts were as long as a thumb, all the sprouts and withered branches exploded. A cyan sword appeared in Chang Minghua's hand. Of course, a dense sword chi surged out from his body and rushed into the air. Hum 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 hum. Immediately after, two intense sword cries resounded. A stone pillar-like flying sword appeared in the hands of the sword master of the Black Phoenix sword sect, Chilean Dai. The thick stone pillar in the hands of the old woman was particularly dazzling. Moreover, the stone pillar-like flying sword was overflowing with a kind of green light. This sword was the profound cyan light sword. The last sword hum naturally came from the Tai Azure light sword. This was the flying sword that Xiao Hua first saw in the Chicken Crow Mountain. Now, it was in the hands of the scarlet-faced sword master of the High Wind Sword Sect, Zhuo Ming's hand. Hum. 5 cyan light swords appeared. 5 different types of sword qi floated in the air above Lake Chui, causing the wind and clouds in the sky to change. Even the sword intent hidden in the bodies of the 10 third-grade sword transformation elders was activated. Sword cries came out from the bodies of these elders. One after another, the cries didn't stop. After the time it took to eat half a meal, the 5 types of sword qi finally converged into the 5 cyan light swords. The wind and clouds in the sky also gradually dissipated. The sword cries above Lake Chui also slowly subsided. Cheng Minghua withdrew his hand, and the Tai Azure light sword entered his arm. Looking at the Tai Azure light sword in Ruo Tian's hand, he couldn't help but sigh. These 5 cyan light swords cost the cultivators of my sword domain a lot of effort, not to mention the time it took. Even if I had the confidence to forge these 5 cyan light swords, from the initial Tai Azure light sword to the final Tai Azure light sword, it took more than 10 years of effort. There were many dangers in the process. Several cyan light swords encountered obstacles. If it wasn't for the protection of my sword domain ancestors, these cyan light swords would have failed on the verge of success. AI, that's right. Ruo Tian, who was the last to arrive, waved his hand. The fiery flying sword emitted a fiery cyan light. Ruo Tian looked at the glaring cyan light inside. Innate metal qi and other items can be considered easy, but this innate true fire is extremely rare in my cold sword domain. If someone didn't know, even if you beat this old man to death, this old man wouldn't believe that this innate item was in the extreme north of my sword domain. The sword domain is bitterly cold. This cold qi must have forced the true fire to gather somewhere. Moreover, this true fire is definitely stronger than the true fire of the 3 kingdoms. But the sword domain is so vast. Who knows where this true fire is gathered? Chong Taishu nodded. Miss Juxia's ability is definitely not something we can compare to. Not only that, Ruo Tian nodded. This Ruo prostrates himself in admiration of Miss Juxia. That day, when this Ruo began to forge the Tai Azure light sword, she already said that although this Tai Azure light sword was the easiest to forge, she didn't even need to go there to know that the innate true fire of my sword domain has a cold nature. It's not suitable for the refinement of the Tai Azure light sword. I'm afraid that the refinement will succeed in the end. And as this Ruo Tian thought, what's so special about these innate items? But who would have thought that her guess was right? Although this Ruo Tian suffered the most during the refinement, this Ruo Tian can pat his chest and say that this Ruo Tian also obtained the most benefits. Hearing this, a trace of jealousy flashed across the eyes of Soaring Wind Sword Sect Zhuo Ming, and he said self-deprecatingly, "That's right. This Zhuo Tian wanted to refine the Tai Azure light sword at all times. Unfortunately, the innate Golden Mother is at Chicken Crow Mountain, which is the territory of the 7 Skills sect. In order to not attract the attention of the Dao sect's cultivators, this Zhuo Tian could only do it secretly. Although the battle at Chicken Crow Mountain caused a huge commotion and the Dao sect's Phoenix Child rose out of nowhere, fortunately, this item was successfully refined at the beginning of the battle. This Zhuo Tian can be considered to have accomplished his mission." Black Phoenix Sword Sect's Beautiful Butterfly also sighed. "That's right. Who asked the Dao sect's territory to be so vast? The innate True Earth is also near Clear Cave." What scared this old woman the most was that the Zhao family of Clear Cave actually discovered the secret of the Tai Azure light sword. In order to minimize the impact, this old woman had no choice but to completely exterminate the Zhao family. Fortunately, those golden core children in the discussion hall who were like pigs and beasts didn't notice too much. Moreover, Ruo Chang's subsequent concealment eliminated their suspicions. If they were to discover that we were laying down the Heaven One Azure Light Sword formation, I'm afraid this sword formation would be unable to be completed. Hearing this, Void Heaven Sword Sect's Chong Taishu also nodded. Swordmaster Beautiful Butterfly is right. Our sword domain's Heaven One Azure Light Sword formation hasn't been completed for who knows how many years. The Tai Azure Light, 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 and Tai Azure Light are extremely rare. Even with the power of our sword domain, it is difficult to find all of them. This time, in the Dao Sword War, it was all thanks to Lady Juxia's strength that we were able to find traces of the 5 Azure Lights and began to refine the Azure Light Sword. That's not all. Beautiful Butterfly continued. Don't be fooled by Ruo Chang's calm command. In the first stage, she exterminated almost all of the Golden Core cultivators. However, this was all part of Lady Juxia's plan. Ruo Chang only took advantage of her familiarity with Lady Juxia, which was why she was able to make such outstanding contributions in the Dao Sword War. Fortunately, Lady Juxia ended up in our sword domain. If she had appeared in the Cultivation 3 Kingdoms, I wouldn't dare to imagine the predicament our sword domain would be in and the outcome of this Dao Sword War. Chong Taishu said with great joy. Sword Master Chong. The others didn't speak and only listened to the 5 sword masters in charge of the Azure Light Sword. At this time, Swordmaster Ouyang Mingxiu of the Xin Sword Sect said, Lady Juxia promised our sword domain 2 important things. One was to repel the soul cultivators who invaded our sword domain, and the other was to help our sword domain obtain victory in the Dao Sword War. Now, it seems that the second task is more than half complete. Our sword Dao Sword War is already in our grasp. But what about the first task? There seems to be no sign of it. Swordmaster Ouyang, Chong Taishu said with a smile, actually, these 2 tasks are one. This Chong clearly remembers that when we went to Miss Juxia's place that day, she agreed to help us resolve the crisis of soul cultivators in our sword domain, even though she herself didn't know how to do it. Was this the Dao Sword War? It didn't erupt that day, but we felt that it would erupt sooner or later, so we used these 2 tasks as bargaining chips to negotiate with Lady Juxia. Lady Juxia agreed to these 2 tasks, but later on, I thought about it carefully. We wanted to take advantage of Lady Juxia, but in the end, we still fell into her trap. Hearing this, not only Ouyang Mingxiu, but the other nearly 10 third-grade swordmasters also showed a look of realization. Yes, although Chong Taishu didn't say much, the fact was already in front of everyone. Now that Tian had returned with the refined Supreme Harmony Cyan Light Sword, the sword cultivators only needed to set up the Tianyi Cyan Light Sword formation according to Juxia's previous plan, and the Dao Sword War would end. But the swordsmen had invaded a lot of territory in the country of Shi and the country of Lian, so naturally, they couldn't return it to the Taoism sect. If the swordsmen of the sword domain moved to the country of Shi and then to the country of Lian, then the battle between the swordsmen and the soul cultivators would end, right? Even if the sword domain gave up to the soul cultivators, the swordsmen would be safe. What Lady Juxia promised was also done. Alas, we are too weak to scheme against Lady Juxia. Cheng Minghua sighed again and said, instead of thinking about this, it's better to think about how to set up the Tianyi Cyan Light Sword formation outside the Sky Patrol City and take it down. It's not difficult to set up a sword formation outside the Sky Patrol City. Chong Taishu said with a smile, at the beginning of the war, we deliberately diverted our attention from the Sky Patrol City to prevent the Taoism sect cultivators from noticing the Sky Patrol City. To tell you the truth, Lady Juxia told me to quietly set up a formation within 100 miles of the Sky Patrol City. Oh, I remember that before Qin Jian of the Void Heaven Sword School fell, I transformed into a human form and passed by the Sky Patrol City. I also specifically warned them not to appear near the Sky Patrol City, so as not to arouse the suspicion of the cultivators. I didn't want them to find traces of my formation. -11. Chapter 29-29. Speaking of transformation, Chong Taishu frowned slightly. However, he continued, not only that, after the Taoist Sword War entered the second stage, we followed Miss Juxia's arrangement and repeatedly revealed the flaws of creating a diversion. This made the Taoist sect cultivators think that our target was the Sky Patrolling City, but our real target was not the Sky Patrolling City. This gave them a confusing illusion that they could not make a judgment. Under such circumstances, it shouldn't be too difficult for us to get close to the Sky Patrol City and set up the Tianyi Azure Light Sword formation on top of the sword formation I had set up earlier, right? Sigh, yes. The safest place is also the most dangerous place. It's not just Miss Juxia's arrangement for Swordmaster Chong. Blue Butterfly sighed at the mention of Juxia. It's this series of inexplicable arrangements. Even I don't know what her purpose is. If Swordmaster Chung didn't mention it today, I would still be thinking about how to set up the sword formation under the nose of the Shui region Taoist master. You, on the other hand, started more than 10 years ago. You've kept us in the dark for so long. Zhuaming of the Lingfeng sword sect laughed and said, "It doesn't matter if we faint, as long as Miss Juxia doesn't faint. We just need to follow the arrangement and set up the sword formation in the Sky Patrol City." Okay, the 5 of us will set up the formation. Ruo Tian nodded. The other sword masters will withdraw their forces and march toward the Sky Patrol City. I'd like to see if the Taoist sect cultivators are as Miss Juxia predicted. They'll definitely think that our siege on the Sky Patrol City is just a diversion. Hee, I'll definitely believe it. Chung Minghua smiled and said, "Shall I bet with Swordmaster Ruo?" "SK. I'll bet that the cultivators will be careless and not take the sword formation seriously." Ruo Tian raised his slanted eyebrows and said disdainfully, "All right." The other sword masters agreed to the arrangement. However, before they could leave, Chung Taishu, who was frowning earlier, raised his voice and said, "Fellow sword masters, I still have something to say." "Swordmaster Chung, what's the important thing?" Chung Minghua was puzzled. "Well, it's important." Chung Taishu nodded. "I received a message from Xue Mingcha, a disciple of my Void Heaven Sword School. That terrifying phoenix Xiaohua, who went to the sword domain to train, is just as Qi Peng said. Not only is she that nameless nascent soul cultivator, but she also has the sword origin of my sword domain. Moreover, the cultivation of that sword origin is quite high. It's almost on the verge of transforming into a sword." "What? Is this true?" Chung Minghua couldn't believe it. Who is this person? He had the Phoenix Dharma body, the identity of a Foundation establishment cultivator from the Imperial Thunder sect, and the identity of a nameless nascent soul cultivator. And now, a swordsman who has surpassed the 3rd grade of the illusory sword realm has appeared. These 3 may be Taoists? Because he has the transfiguration technique, his 2 appearances might be fake. Chung Taishu nodded. "Actually, what we should be asking is, what is this person trying to do?" Furthermore, the strangest thing was that the soul cultivators in Ming Mountains had sent word that this person had actually entered Ming Mountains. What is he going to do there? Sword masters, think about it. Is there anyone in your sword's gate that has surpassed the 3rd grade of the illusory sword? Hearing Chung Taishu's words, Blue Butterfly asked loudly, "This?" All the sword masters frowned and thought for a moment, but no one stepped forward to answer. "Alas, it's as I thought." Chung Taishu sighed and said, "This Wu Ming must be hiding in a small sword sect, not in our big sword sect. He must have some plans. He must have some plans in hiding in our sword realm. In that case, what are his plans for having 2 identities in the Imperial Lightning sect?" Ruo Tian asked curiously. He revealed 2 identities as disciples of the Imperial Thunder School with different cultivations. But does he only have 2 identities? In my opinion, he must have other identities. He also covets the Dao sect. Zhuaming said, "Hee, in that case, we must keep this a secret." Chung Taishu sneered. "We just have to be vigilant and see what that bastard wants to do in our sword realm. As for what he wants to do in the 3 kingdoms, what does it have to do with us? We must not let the Dao sect know about this secret. But I heard that the horrifying phoenix has killed many illusory swordsmen in our sword realm. Although we don't know what his intentions are, he is so arrogant in the name of the horrifying phoenix. Isn't that destroying the prestige of the sword realm and the arrogance of the Dao sect cultivators? If our sword realm doesn't give him a head-on blow, wouldn't it be a disgrace to our sword realm?" "Yes, I have the same idea." Chung Taishu smiled. "After discussing with you, I will send out the Sword Master's command again, ordering the 2nd grade sword transformation disciples to head to Drifting Cloud Lake. No matter what his intentions are in Ming Mountains, we must block the horrifying phoenix's path back to the kingdom of Shi. On one hand, we must see if we can kill this bastard. On the other hand, even if we can't kill him, we must find out his true identity and purpose." "Good." Black Phoenix Sword Sect's Chi India clapped her hands and said, "I will also send out the Sword Master's command. ordering the second-grade sword transformation disciples of Black Phoenix Sword Sect to head there. My Soaring Wind Sword Sect also has a great enmity with the horrifying Phoenix. Zhuaming smiled. Moreover, my Soaring Wind Sword Sect is closer to Drifting Cloud Lake. I will also send out a second-grade illusory sword disciple. Good. 3 second-grade sword transformation swordsmen. There's no reason why they can't capture a nascent soul cultivator, right? Chong Taishu clapped his hands and smiled. Then, the 3 of them sent out the Sword Master's command. However, just as their Sword Master's command disappeared, a sword beam rushed in through the gap. A tall female swordsman stepped on the sword beam and landed in front of Chili India of Black Phoenix Sword Sect. When the sword aura around the female swordsman dissipated, LV Ruochang's figure was revealed. Junior LV Ruochang greets Swordmaster Qi and the other swordmasters. LV Ruochang stopped and did not dare to be negligent. He bowed to the dozens of people around him. Hee, get up, Ruochang. You are the hero of the great battle of Dao and Sword. You should be recuperating in the Sword Tomb. Why are you here today? Qi Liandia looked at her proud disciple and asked with a smile. Sword Master Qi. LV Ruochang clapped his hands and took out a sword slip. He respectfully handed it over and said, Junior received news from my Void Heaven Sword Sect's disciples near the Sword Edge Mountain. This news is really incredible. Junior did not dare to neglect and personally delivered it. Incredible news? Chili India was also puzzled. She took the sword slip and scanned it with her divine sense. But after a moment, she involuntarily exclaimed, how is this possible? Millions of soul cultivators in Ming Mountain actually took the initiative to evacuate. Not a single one is left. What? Hearing Chili India's words, let alone Chong Taishu, all the other sword masters were stunned. They had racked their brains to start the great battle of Dao in advance. They had worked hard for more than 10 years and finally won the battle. They were about to escape the pursuit of the soul cultivators. But in the end, the soul cultivators were not playing anymore. It seemed that the tens of years of fighting and the hundreds of thousands of fallen swordsmen had turned into an illusion. Everyone's heart was empty. They even had an impulse to roar in their hearts, damn it, if we knew this would happen, why would we fight so hard? Is this news true? Chong Taishu sighed and looked at LV Ruochang. Reporting to Swordmaster Chong, LV Ruochang respectfully replied, Junior received a message from Swordmaster Xiao Giant Pain of the Mountain Patrol Sword Sect. He is presiding over the battle with the soul cultivators. There should be no mistake. Chong Taishu nodded slightly. The Mountain Patrol Sword Sect was not a first-class sword sect in Sword Realm. Xiao Giant Pain was only a second-grade swordsman. However, soul cultivators were not as strong as cultivators in attacking Sword Realm. Soul cultivators planned to advance step by step. Moreover, the soul cultivators sent their soul cultivators into the battle were generally not of high cultivation. They relied on the number of soul cultivators and the mystery of soul skills to suppress the swordsmen. Therefore, under Juxia's suggestion, Sword Realm put more power into the Great Battle of Dao and Sword Realm. For the Great Battle of Soul Swords that started the Great Battle of Dao and Sword Realm, second-grade or even third-grade sword sects were sent into the battle. This was because the sword cultivators knew that the power of millions of Ming Mountain was enormous. In the face of such a huge beast, sword cultivators were not very confident of winning. The best thing they could do was to take over Sky Patrol City and expand the territory of Sword Realm. Miss Juxia is really a god. Chong Taishu looked at the sword slip handed to him by Chili India and waved his hand slightly, gesturing for others to check it. He looked up in the direction of Sword Realm and sighed. She did not lie to us. Just now, we were talking about how the 2 things she promised us were completed. Now, the first thing has been completed perfectly. Yes, Senior Juxia is really amazing. Lu Ruochang's eyes flashed with a strange light. I feel that nothing in this world is a secret to her. She can almost predict the past 500 years and the future 500 years. Does the retreat of the soul cultivators have anything to do with Miss Juxia? Cheng Minghua looked at the sword slip and asked hesitantly. Of course. Lu Ruochang nodded. Swordmaster Cheng, according to Swordmaster Zhao's message, Senior Juxia left for Ming Mountain. Some sword cultivators have also seen Senior Juxia occasionally. In particular, Senior Juxia returned from Ming Mountain last year and came to the vicinity of the sword catacomb. When I saw her, she said that the soul cultivators would withdraw in less than 2 years. Then, she went back to cultivate in seclusion. Of course, Senior Juxia just casually mentioned this to me and did not ask me to inform the sword masters. I dared not report it rashly for fear that I would mislead the war. Miss Juxia came to the sword catacomb? What was she doing here? Qi Liandia did not have any scruples in front of her disciple and asked directly. -11. Chapter 29:30. Lu Ruochang was also at a loss. He shook his head slightly and said, I don't know. Senior Juxia did not go into detail. She only stayed for half a day. She only asked about the situation of the Dao-seeking sword battle. At this time, all the sword masters had finished reading the sword slip. The sword slip finally fell into Chong Taishu's hands. Chong Taishu looked at the inch-long sword slip in his hand and smiled bitterly. He shook his head slightly and said, How good would it be if this thing came 10 years ago? Now that the warriors of the sword domain have killed their way to the Sky Patrol City, they can take it down at any time. Yet, this thing came at such a time. How can we? At this point, Chong Taishu's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. He raised his head and said, Sword Masters, what do you think is the right thing to do now? Should we quit while we're ahead and return to the sword domain with the spoils of the Dao-seeking sword battle? Or should we take down the Sky Patrol City in one go? Hehe. Not only Cheng Minghua, who was beside Chong Taishu, but even the sword masters in the distance showed disdain on their faces and snorted coldly. However, no one spoke. They just waited quietly. Ruochang, what do you think? Qi Liandia smiled slightly. She glanced at Lu Ruochang and asked with a smile, After all, you've experienced the first stage of the Dao-seeking sword battle. You have a deep understanding of the path sect's cultivators and have your own confidence in this battle. Lu Ruochang was slightly stunned. After thinking for a while, he replied, Sword Master, in my opinion, this matter is decided by the sword domain. It has nothing to do with Senior Juxia. When she came to the sword domain last time, although she already knew that the soul sword battle was about to end, she did not let me inform the masters. This has already shown her attitude. Qi Liandia nodded slightly and glanced at Chong Taishu. The two exchanged glances and seemed to have made a decision. Lu Ruochang said again, The path sect's cultivators are the most cunning. Although there were not many talents comparable to Tu Hong in the conference hall of the Sky Patrol City, during the Sword Tomb battle, I still fell into their trap and almost failed to live up to the master's expectations. Therefore, I feel that even though the sword domain has repeatedly used the Sky Patrol City as a diversion, the Dao sect's cultivators, such as Pan Dongmin from the Lanli sect and Zhu Chenghe from the Su Yin sect, might have seen through the plan. Maybe they have already set a trap in the Sky Patrol City and are waiting for us to fall into it. In the worst-case scenario, they will even divert some of their attention to the Sky Sentry City to prevent us from launching a surprise attack on the Sky Sentry City. Ruochang, you mean, we should stop while we're ahead? Chong Taishu asked with a smile. Yes, that's what I think. Lu Ruochang said respectfully. Since the sword master asked me to say it, I'll tell you what I think. After all, the Sky Patrol City has been managed by the Shui Yu spiritual master and the other castellans for tens of thousands of years. It's not easy to take down the Sky Patrol City. Moreover, if the path sect's cultivators surround us from the outside, it'll be even more troublesome. You're right. Chong Taishu nodded. After the first stage of the battle, you've improved a lot. You know when to advance and retreat. You're not as reckless as you were at the beginning. I'm afraid you'll be the leader in the next sword battle. I wouldn't dare. Lu Ruochang hurriedly bowed and then changed the topic. All plans are based on knowing one's enemy. I only watched the battle from the Sword Tomb battle, so I can't fully grasp the subtleties of the battle. In fact, in my heart, I still think. Oh, what do you think? Cheng Minghua raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, Do you have other ideas? Sword Master Cheng. Lu Ruochang nodded and said, Logically speaking, I think we should withdraw. But in my heart, I'm a little unwilling. After all, we've already killed our way into the country of Shi and the country of Huan. In the first stage, we've gained the upper hand. In the second stage, under the leadership of our masters, we're not at a disadvantage even when facing so many nascent soul stage practitioners. Now that we've reached the final blow, wouldn't it be too regretful if we give up? The Sword Tomb battle is no longer a natural barrier, and the Sky Patrol City has replaced it as the key to defeating the enemy. If our Sword Realm takes down the Sky Patrol City, it's tantamount to having one foot in the country of Shi and a short sword firmly inserted in the territory of the 3 cultivation countries. This place is too important for the future development of our Sword Realm. If the Sword Masters have the means to kill it in one blow. Speaking of this, Lu Ruochang gritted his teeth and hesitated for a moment before saying, I still think we should take down the Sky Patrol City, but if we take down the Sky Patrol City, dozens of nascent soul stage practitioners from the 3 cultivation countries will gather in the Sky Patrol City. Our Sword Realm only has a dozen Sword Masters here, and with the Sky Patrol City as a burden, I'm afraid it's not easy to resist these menacing nascent soul stage practitioners. Chong Taishu still had a smile on his face as he asked Lu Ruochang. Sigh, yes. That's why I'm hesitating. Lu Ruochang did not hide the contradiction in his heart. The warriors of our Sword Realm have always been good at offense and not defense. If we take down the Sky Patrol City, the Sky Patrol City will bear the brunt of the Dao Sword War in the future, and even the usual attacks will not be reduced. This is different from the previous war. Facing dozens of nascent soul stage practitioners, even those who did not participate in the war will come out to participate in the war when they see that things have developed beyond their expectations. This has a far-reaching impact. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll win every battle. That's true. Chong Taishu praised. Ruochang's analysis of the war situation is very good. His estimation of the strength and reaction of the 3 cultivation countries is also very accurate. It's just that he underestimated the power of our Sword Realm. Isn't this Miss Juxia's idea? Chili India smiled. In order to keep it a secret, only the 5 of us know about the sky blue light sword formation. The Sword Masters only knew about it a year ago. It would be strange if Ruochang knew about it. Sky blue light sword formation? Lu Ruochang's face showed ecstasy. Swordmaster, are you talking about the sky blue light sword, Tai Qing green light sword, Tai Wei green light sword, Tai Xian green light sword, Tai Yi green light sword, and Tai Hei green light sword that are part of the innate 5 elements? Hee hee, you silly child. If it's not this sword formation, what sword formation is there? Qi Liandia rebuked, but her face was full of pride. Great. Since there's such a big killing formation, why are you still hesitating? Let's take down the Sky Patrol City. Lu Ruochang clapped his hands and shouted. But after saying that, Lu Ruochang panicked again and hurriedly smiled. I'm sorry for my rudeness. Please forgive me. Haha, it's okay. It's okay. Chong Taishu waved his hand and laughed. You've said exactly what we're thinking. The Sky Patrol City is now a piece of fat meat, and it's already at the mouth of our Sword Realm. How can we give it up? Not to mention the dozens of nascent Soul Realm cultivators who are participating in the battle. Even if there are dozens more, they'll all fall into the Sky Azure Light Sword formation and die. That's right. Chili India also smiled. The Taoist sect cultivators have backup, but so does our Sword Realm. When Swordmaster Xiao returns from the Battle of Soul Swords with the Sword Realm warriors, we'll surround the Taoist sect cultivators. We'll show them the power of the Iron Blood Swordsman. Hearing Chong Taishu and Chili India's words, all the Swordmasters smiled. They knew that even if they wanted to withdraw from the battle at this point, the participating swordsmen would not agree. This was a rare opportunity for the Sword Realm. Moreover, hundreds of thousands of swordsmen would withdraw from the Battle of Soul Swords, and they would be a powerful backup. They would have no problem dealing with the cultivators of the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. Then I'll return to the Sword Tomb and prepare to welcome Swordmaster Xiao back. Lu Ruochang bowed and said, I wish you all success and take down the Sky Patrol City in one fell swoop. Wait. Seeing that Lu Ruochang was about to leave, Chong Taishu stopped him. Oh? Swordmaster Chong, do you have any other orders? Lu Ruochang was curious. Chong Taishu smiled and said, Ruochang, do you still remember Wu Ming from the Imperial Thunder sect? At the mention of Wu Ming, Lu Ruochang's face flushed with shame and anger. He nodded fiercely and said, "Of course I remember, and it's unforgettable. If there's a chance to kill him with your sword, are you willing to go?" Chong Taishu's expression remained unchanged, seemingly satisfied with Lu Ruochang's ruthlessness. "Of course," Lu Ruochang replied without hesitation. "I'll do whatever Sword Master Chong says. Before you came, I've already issued a Sword Master's order to the disciples guarding outside the valley. Your martial aunt Feng Suewu is going to the Drifting Cloud Lake to stop Wu Ming. If you want to go, you can go with your martial aunt Feng." Qi Liandia looked at Lu Ruochang with satisfaction. Drifting Cloud Lake? Lu Ruochang was stunned. Isn't that the Ming Mountains? Wu Ming, why is he in Ming Mountains? Who sent this news? Of course someone sent it. And you know this person, Chong Taishu said with a smile, but he did not say the person's name directly. Lu Ruochang frowned, and there was a hint of realization in her eyes. As for why Wu Ming went to Ming Mountains, that person doesn't know, and neither do we, Chong Taishu said again. But who is Wu Ming? I'm afraid it's beyond your expectations. Who is Wu Ming? Lu Ruochang was stunned again. She really did not know what Chong Taishu meant. But when Chong Taishu told Lu Ruochang that Wu Ming might be the terrifying phoenix Xiaohua, Lu Ruochang's face showed great astonishment. But after the astonishment, Lu Ruochang's brows gradually relaxed. Yes, there was nothing in this world that could be hidden from others. Everything could not stand up to scrutiny. The strength difference between Xiaohua and Wu Ming was too big, so no one could connect them. However, when someone really connected the two people with different identities, then countless clues would surface. People were good at catching wind and making groundless accusations. They could even make up groundless rumors, let alone this real thing. -11. Chapter 29:31. That bastard. LV Ruochang gritted her teeth in hatred. After a long while, she finally spat out those two words. "All right, you can go now." Qi India waved her hand and said, "It'll be best if you can uncover John Doe's secret. Otherwise, bring his head back to the sword domain." "Yes, I understand. I'll look for Martial Aunt Feng Suewu now." LV Ruochang did not delay. She bowed and was about to leave on her flying sword when she suddenly stopped and asked softly, I have something to tell you, but I'm not sure if I should say it." "Just say it." Chong Taishu smiled. "I think that Xiaohua and the others are the heroes of the Dao sect in this great war of Dao sword. Whether they have their own secrets or are arranged by the Dao sect cultivators, their lives are very important to the Dao sect cultivators. Previously, we were focused on the Great War of Dao Sword and the Great War of Soul Swords, so we didn't pay much attention to them. Now that everything has been settled, why don't we leak the news of us killing Xiaohua and the others to the Dao sect cultivators? For the sake of the Dao sect's reputation, the cultivators will definitely send late-stage gold core or even early-stage nascent soul disciples to Ming Mountains. We can set up an ambush and take the opportunity to kill the Dao sect cultivators." LV Ruochang told them her plan in one breath and looked at Chong Taishu quietly. She felt that the sword masters would definitely agree to her plan of killing two birds with one stone. Unfortunately, Chong Taishu shook his head with a smile and denied LV Ruochang's plan without discussing it with Qi Liandia and the others. "Martial niece LV, although your plan is excellent, the Dao sect cultivators might be able to see through it. Drifting Cloud Lake is deep in the sword domain. Will the Dao sect cultivators go there? Right now, the focus is not on Xiaohua and the others, but on the Great War of Dao Sword and the Sky Patrol City. As long as we don't take down the Sky Patrol City and drive the Dao sect cultivators away, the Great War of Dao Sword will not end. This is also the reason why I didn't kill Xiaohua and the others when they rushed into my sword domain to train. Most importantly, that Xiaohua might not be Xiaohua. Wu Ming is Wu Ming. Who knows what this mysterious person covets for my sword domain and the three kingdoms of cultivation? Even if we can't kill Xiaohua and the others this time, we definitely can't let the Dao sect's cultivators notice Xiaohua. This old man has a feeling that he might be related to something? Not to mention Lu Ruochang. Even Ruatian and the others were puzzled. Don't forget the death of Sky Patrol City's Tu Hong. Chong Taishu pointed his finger and said, this Tu Hong is a rarely seen commander among the Dao sect cultivators. He is definitely comparable to Martial Nephew Liu. But who was the one who killed him? Qin Jian had personally admitted that he didn't know. When Tu Hong was killed, I was near Sky Sentry City and saw Tu Hong with my own eyes. He did not recognize my sword Qi, but I recognized him. He definitely did not kill Tu Hong. Moreover, as far as this old man knows, the person who killed Tu Hong knows the Devil Sect's concealment technique. Tu Hong's dual cultivation partner is also a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. At this point, Chong Taishu stopped talking and looked at everyone with a smile. This junior understands. Lu Ruochang's face revealed a look of realization again. He nodded and said, this person might be Wu Ming. Only Wu Ming's cultivation could kill Tu Hong. This Wu Ming is not a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, but a disciple of the Heavenly Demon Sect. If he is a disciple of the Heavenly Demon Sect, what is his purpose in sneaking into the Imperial Thunder Sect? This is a very interesting scene, Chong Taishu said with a smile. Blue Butterfly also came to a realization. If Wu Ming is killed by Tu Hong, the Dao Sect cultivators will be at a disadvantage in the Taoist Sword War. The war will be chaotic, and the Dao Sect cultivators will be able to focus on the war. Only then can the Heavenly Demon Sect be established. Sigh. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Our sword domain and the Dao Sect are fighting fiercely, but the Heavenly Demon Sect is the one who benefits in the end. Therefore, even if we can't find Wu Ming, capture him, or kill him, we must hide this matter from the Dao Sect. Chong Taishu said, let the Heavenly Demon Sect cause trouble behind the Dao Sect cultivators. In the end, won't the ones who benefit be us swordsmen? Yes, this junior understands. Lu Ruochang bowed and did not dare to say anything else. He turned around and flew away. Chong Taishu and the others naturally discussed a little, and then left Lake Chui. In the quiet afternoon, the water of Lake Chui reflected the luster of the sun in the sky. The luster on the windless lake was so pale that it was even more bleak than the blood that flowed during the Taoist Sword War. It was as if the clear emerald color of Lake Chui could not withstand the boundless waves of blood that were stirred up by a few words from a dozen transformed swords. Xiao Huan naturally did not know that he had been completely seen through by the transformed swords of the sword domain. Currently, he was in a quiet room, looking at the sleepy little black and not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Since that day in the ancestral hall of the Hutu stronghold, Xiao Hua had placed Little Black into his spirit storage pouch. Because he had discovered the secret of the Green Seal text, he had been comprehending the Green Seal text and had placed Little Black to the side. Today, after returning from Old Wu's place, he knew that he had 80 days of free time to cultivate. Thus, he took out Little Black and prepared to ask about it. But who would have thought that Little Black would become like this? Xiao Hua was very familiar with Little Black's appearance. It was exactly the same as Little Yellow's appearance after swallowing its soul. Thinking of Little Yellow, Xiao Hua's mouth twitched, and he pulled Little Yellow out of the space. Sure enough, Little Yellow's eyes were also blurry and sleepy. It barely opened its eyes a little and then closed them again, as if there was 1,000 gene weight hanging on its eyelids. Xiao Hua did not send Little Yellow into the space. Instead, he anxiously said in his heart, "Little Black? This is Little Yellow. Do you know him?" Little Black also opened its eyes a little and looked around blankly. It only glanced at Little Yellow and said in a somewhat shaky voice, "Yes, Father. This is Little Yellow." So he was with Father. "Oh, you really are Little Black." Xiao Hua was finally able to confirm this and sent Little Yellow into the space. Where did Little Yellow go? Little Black looked all around. In a moment, Father will send you to find him. Xiao Hua smiled and asked, "How do you know Father is called Zhang Xiaohua? Why did you have the Hutu stronghold spirit warriors look for Father in Huan country? Also, do you know where Father came from? Does Father have a home? Is there anyone else in the family? Has anyone ever called Father Zhang Xiaohua that?" Father agreed. Also, didn't Father have something in his hand? That little girl said it was a flying sword. Little Black's eyes were still closed, and he answered intermittently, "What's home? What do you mean there's someone else in the family?" Fine, Xiaohua understood. This Little Black and Little Yellow were the same. They didn't know anything, and he couldn't ask them anything at all. However, Little Black seemed to be a little more sensible than Little Yellow. At least he knew that he was called Zhang Xiaohua, and that he used to have a sword embryo in his hand. "Forget it. Let's talk about it after I raise the two of you." Xiaohua smiled bitterly and sent Little Black into the space. Little Black was extremely astonished. He forced himself to open his eyes and look around at the unfamiliar place. However, when he saw Little Black, he felt at ease and obediently lay down next to Little Yellow to sleep. Little Silver, who had been swinging between the spirit grasses, was so scared that he jumped down from the spirit grasses when he saw Little Black suddenly appear. He burrowed into the roots of the spirit grasses and stayed there for a long time before his sharp nose and furtive rat eyes popped out and stared at Little Black. He didn't know what kind of divine being had suddenly appeared. After sending Little Black into the space, Xiaohua stretched out his hand and took out the soul nest that the Shaman King had given him and the bone that Hutu Stockade's Elder Wu had given him. Xiaohua first opened the soul nest and scanned it with his soul consciousness. Xiaohua was immediately stunned. This soul nest didn't look big, but the space inside was more than 10 times larger than an ordinary storage bag. Inside the soul nest, there were countless strange plants piled up. Some of these plants looked like spirit grasses, some looked like withered branches and withered leaves, and there were also many that were simply seeds. He couldn't tell what they were at all. Apart from these plants, there were some strange things. Some looked like materials for refining tools, some looked like broken pill furnaces. In short, Xiaohua couldn't tell the origin of any of them. Damn it! What's the meaning of this Shaman King? Do you really think this young master is a garbage collector? After Xiaohua's astonishment, he pulled a long face. These aren't the strange things you're looking for. What kind of bones did you get? Can't you give me the bone? I haven't collected all the bones in this young master's space yet. However, it was very obvious that Xiaohua was delusional to think that he could find these bones in the millions of Ming mountains. There were some green seal scripts in these bones. Of course, they were things that soul cultivators could discover. The Shaman King also understood that how could he give these things to Xiaohua? Forget it. Forget it. This was the second time Xiaohua had to accept this kind of extreme helplessness. He sent the soul nest into the space. At this moment, those puppets had stopped. They were no longer planting and harvesting millet seeds day and night. Xiaohua sent these puppets and the soul nest to another remote edge of the space. He let the puppets plant the strange plants in the soul nest one by one on the ground. Xiaohua's space was already more than 1,000 miles wide. Although it was far from the millions of Ming mountains, it was more than enough to plant these things. Of course, it wasn't that Xiaohua didn't think that the Shaman King, who possessed divine arts, would be able to divine his biggest secret. However, he still felt that even someone as powerful as Juxia would only be able to find some clues. It was impossible for him to know that this space didn't belong to Xiaoyu continent. If the Shaman King knew about this, would he still need to worry about the change of the weather in the millions of Ming mountains? After arranging everything, Xiaohua sent his soul sense into the bone and carefully read through the contents of this green seal script. He already had an idea of how to practice this green seal script. Although this green seal script was not the same as the green seal script, Reign of Misty Cloud sect, and even the nature of the record was very different, he had after all used this green seal script to refine his voodoo puppets. He had completely practiced the art of traveling clouds and summoning rain. Therefore, he wasn't unfamiliar with this voodoo incantation whose effect he didn't know. -11. Chapter 29:32. Currently, Xiaohua was still practicing the most basic 50 green seal scripts in the heaven of Ring of Breath, and was still trying to understand the realm of Dao Xingyi. Therefore, he was not in a hurry to practice this new talisman technique. What he needed to do now was to follow the instructions given to him by Ziming, using the soul cultivator technique in the bone to record the technique of traveling clouds and summoning rain. Initially, Xiaohua thought he had already mastered the green seal script, and he thought it would not be too difficult for him to record the technique using the divine will of Taoist sect. But when he began to record the technique according to the soul cultivator technique in the bone, he realized that the method used by soul cultivators to record the green seal script was completely different from the method used by Daoist sect to record the jade slip. The technique used to record the technique was completely a soul technique. If the method used by Daoist sect to record the jade slip was the writing method used by mortals, then there was no need to write anything, as all one needed to do was to copy the content stroke by stroke, and the quality of the handwriting did not matter. But the method used by soul cultivators to record the green seal script required one to understand the content of the text, and every stroke had to be exactly the same as the text. If there was even the slightest difference, the green seal script would not be able to be recorded. But in this case, recording the technique of traveling clouds and summoning rain was like Xiao Hua carefully comprehending the entire technique and teaching it to others word by word. Thinking back to his reckless behavior in front of Grandmaster Wu that day in the palace, Xiao Hua could not help but smile wryly. His arrogant behavior made his face burn. Xiao Hua's body was flashing with a faint green light, countless soul threads were dancing in front of his eyes, and strange syllables were being played without any rhythm. The wind and clouds in the quiet room were flickering, and the capital star formation was changing from time to time. Putting aside the fact that Xiao Hua had recorded the lost art of traveling clouds and summoning rain for Ming Shan and Huda Stockade, in the distant territory of Lian Kingdom, there was a huge mountain range that had a beautiful scenery. The bottom layer of the steep foothills was lush and green, and there were some tall and straight spirit trees growing around it. Although there were no spirit birds flying among these spirit trees, it still gave off the aura of an immortal realm. Looking up at the foot of the mountain, the emerald green gradually turned into a dry and yellow color. The spiritual trees and spiritual grasses at the bottom of the mountain had already disappeared, replaced by some thorny plants. These plants were thick and strong, and between their branches, there was an aura that seemed to want to fight against the heavens. However, these plants only occupied an area of less than 1,000 feet. Further up the mountain, solid soil and hard rocks gradually began to appear. Furthermore, there were some gray-green spots. Upon closer inspection, these spots were actually some thumb-sized moss gathered together. Even the thistles and thorns couldn't survive here. If one looked up, then there was a faint snowy shadow and thin ice that went straight to the peak of the mountain range. Everything had become a world of white snow and ice. A mountain range actually had so many different sceneries. Even in the Xiaoyu continent, it was rarely seen. However, if one looked at the foot of the mountain, then one should be able to understand the formation of this scenery. At the foot of the mountain, there was a misty place. Under the misty clouds, there was an incessant gurgling sound of water. The place where the spirit wood was located was faintly a bamboo shed made of bamboo, and this voice was actually Zhu Chenghe of Su Yen sect. Thank you for your praise, senior brothers. At the sound of the zither, a clear and weak voice came out again. A petite female cultivator walked out of the pavilion and slowly walked to the edge of the hot springs. This female cultivator was in the early gold core stage. Her eyes were big, and her skin was white and clean. However, her face with big eyes was indeed mediocre. Even if she was wearing a Taoist robe, there were no curves on her body. She looked much stronger than ordinary village girls. But if this appearance was compared with the early gold core stage, it was extremely unworthy. However, this female cultivator's big eyes were so lively that even the clouds rising from the hot springs could not cover the divine light in her eyes. This female cultivator was the Jiangfian that Gu Yun of Kunlun sect spoke of. She was a disciple of Nanming sect and was extremely good at analyzing details. She was often a wise person who could see the intentions of ordinary sword cultivators from the details that others could not see. Zhang Fian walked to the side of the hot springs. Her small nose wrinkled slightly, showing a trace of disgust. She raised her eyes to look at the other side of the spirit wood and said loudly, "Senior brother Pan, don't calculate anymore. Come and rest for a moment. Although this 9-eye hot springs has some sulfur chi, there is also a lot of spiritual chi in it. Resting here is extremely beneficial for our cultivation." Tiske, a blue figure flashed across the sky. Zhu Chenghe was still wearing his blue robe and landed beside Jiang Fian. He had a smile on his face and said, "Fairy Fian, I and the others seem to be nearby too, right? Why don't you know to call me? I'm afraid Brother Dongmin isn't the only one who has racked his brains for our Dao sect's war, right? Zhang Fian did not even raise her eyebrows. She looked at the dreamy clouds and said indifferently, Senior Brother Zhu's wisdom is profound and far from what we can compare to. You only have to come up with one plan, and it takes us half a day to think about it. Wasn't this Nine-Eye Hot Springs found by Senior Brother Zhu during his planning? I remember that at that time, I was still accompanying Taiching sect's Daoist Yuqing in Jianchuan Valley to think about how to ambush the Huan Kingdom swordsmen. Senior Brother Pan also occasionally encountered the swordsmen at Peng River. If not for Daoist Qing Yin and Daoist Lao Yun of Emosang Mountain risking their lives to protect him, he might not even have seen this hot spring. Therefore, we can't compare to Senior Brother Zhu. Fairy Fian, we shouldn't have brought this. Zhu Qinghe laughed. This Zhu only said one sentence, but Fairy actually refuted so much. Are you praising me? Or are you insulting me? Of course I'm praising Junior Brother Zhu. A slightly arrogant voice sounded. Then, from the other side of the spiritual tree, a well-built mid-gold core cultivator slowly walked out. This cultivator's eyebrows were like laying silkworms and his nose was like hanging gallbladder. What was even more eye-catching was his 5 strands of long beard. Coupled with his fair skin, he looked exceptionally handsome. When Zhang Fian heard this, she quickly looked up. Her gaze landed on the cultivator's face, and a smile immediately appeared on her face. However, this smile was faint and quickly disappeared. Even her gaze, which had only met the cultivator's gaze for a brief moment, fell to the ground and once again looked into the clouds. Io, Senior Brother Dongmin, I'm already not Fairy Fian's opponent. Now that you're here, we're a pair of good-looking man and talented woman. How can I be your opponent? Zhu Qinghe slapped his forehead exaggeratedly and said in distress, Senior Brother Zhu? A trace of anger flashed across Zhang Fian's face. She said coldly, What do you mean by good-looking man and talented woman? This little sister wants Senior Brother to explain the origin of this. Wang, at this moment, a long whistle came from the other side of the Nine-Eyed Hot Spring. A series of strange crackling sounds came from the spiritual tree. Then, a well-built cultivator with bulging muscles and a few spiritual herbs on his body flew out from the spiritual tree. With a pong, he landed on the ground again and the entire ground shook. Senior Brother Gu Yun, hurry up and come over. Zhu Qinghe was extremely happy when he saw the person. He pointed his hand and said, Hurry up and be the judge. When did this little brother say that we're a good-looking man and talented woman? In this world, there's only a good-looking man and a talented woman, right? No matter how ignorant I am, I won't make a mistake about this. He, the well-built male cultivator was Kunlun sect's Gu Yun, who was in the later stage of the Gold Core realm. He naturally thought that Zhu Qinghe was fighting with Pan Dongmin of the Blue Li sect and Zhang Fian of the Naming sect. Why would he get involved? He just chuckled and walked quickly to a hot spring. He sat down and took off his boots. His 2 black hairy feet dipped into the hot spring with a plop sound. Then, he stretched his body and lay on the ground. He opened his mouth and exhaled a long breath. He seemed to be extremely comfortable. That breath rushed into the clouds in the air. Moments later, an illusion like a flying crane appeared. It flapped its wings and flew above the hot spring, blowing away the clouds. Then, it disappeared. -11. Upon hearing that, Zhu Qinghe was not the only one who was shocked. Even Gu Yun and Zhang Fian, who pretended to ignore him, were shocked. All of them looked towards the foothills. However, Zhu Qinghe and Gu Yun did not gain anything after looking at it for a moment. Instead, Zhang Fian looked pensive, and there was even a hint of joy in her eyes. Junior Brother Pan, spit out what you have to say. Don't be so mysterious. Gu Yun frowned and no longer looked at the foothills. Instead, he looked into the air and said coldly, The great battle of the Dao Sword has been going on for more than 10 years. The battle situation is just like the scene on the foothills. Pan Dongmin pointed with his finger and said, At first, the swordsmen of the Huan Kingdom were unstoppable under LV Ruochang's command. They forced our Tao sect cultivators to a dead end and were restrained in every way. The victory of the swordsman was just like the spiritual trees and spiritual herbs. It seemed to be unstoppable. However, at the end of the spiritual trees was the great battle of the sword tomb. The battle situation changed several times and was unpredictable. It was not clear whether it was warm or cold. Although the warmth still had the upper hand in the middle of the dried-up foothills, the higher it went, the colder it became. This also meant that our Tao sect battle became increasingly powerful and gradually gained the upper hand on the entire battlefield. Just like the ice on this mountain range, no matter which direction you go, you will only end up being covered by a layer of ice. However, no matter how many foothills were covered by a layer of ice, the spiritual trees and spiritual herbs below the foothills were ultimately unable to be destroyed by the ice. Zhang Fian's voice was somewhat weak as she said, "This is because the source of the spiritual trees and spiritual herbs' survival was ultimately unable to be reached by the ice. The Nine-Eye Hot Spring has always been hidden within the clouds. Although the cold wind would occasionally blow the clouds away and reveal the truth would immediately be covered by the clouds. All the chaotic scenes would then fill the air, causing us to be unable to find out where the truth lies." "Good," Zhu Chenghe clapped his hands and said, "As expected of a talented man and a beautiful woman, I admire you." At this moment, Zhang Fian's face was slightly flushed. However, Pan Dongmin ignored her and continued to say, "Even if we saw through the clouds, we could only see one hot spring and two hot springs. It was impossible for us to know that there were actually 9 hot springs in this valley. Furthermore, there were so many spiritual trees and spiritual herbs around the hot springs. How could there only be so many spiritual trees and spiritual herbs?" Gu Yun sneered and said, "There are also 4 pavilions and straw huts, as well as people who burn musical instruments and cook cranes and wash the hot springs in their stinky feet." Hiss! Hearing Gu Yun's words, Pan Dongmin, who originally thought that he had already thought deeply, gasped and said hurriedly, "Senior brother Gu Yun, could it be?" "Yes, junior brother Pan." Gu Yun smiled bitterly and said, "Could it be that you feel that this great battle of Taoist sword is completely different from the previous one? Although we have already planned so much, we still feel that we are unable to do anything despite having the will to do so. The Huan country on the other side, the people who are competing with us, are far more powerful than what we expected. I really did not expect that the sword cultivators of the Huan kingdom would actually have such wisdom. Let's not talk about other things. Just based on the current situation of the battle, I feel that it is not so simple. Although we have already thought and done a lot of things, and have taken precautions in all aspects, I still feel that we have overlooked something. You even feel that after this great battle of Taoist sword, there must be a reason that we do not know, but I still feel that the reason that we want to know is far from the root of this battle. The hot springs are hidden under the clouds and mist, but although the hot springs are the root of these spiritual trees, beside the hot springs are— Zhang Fian muttered to herself, almost losing her voice, could it be that the sword cultivators of the Huan kingdom are not the only ones participating in the battle? They have the support of soul cultivators behind them. Moreover, perhaps there are other cultivators that we do not know about guiding them from behind? The cultivators of the Tao sect? This is not something that we can point fingers at, but soul cultivators? Didn't the Battle of the Sword Catacomb reveal some clues? Pan Dongmin said faintly, "Isn't there a soul formation besides LV Ruochang's square sword formation? If it were not millions of soul cultivators from Ming Mountain, would the swordsman be able to set it up? But later, there were no more soul cultivators?" Zhang Fian bit her pale lips and retorted. Pan Dongmin did not argue with her and only sighed. Unfortunately, it is extremely difficult for the cultivators of the Tao sect to sneak into the ranks of sword cultivators, and the information we receive is also very little. It is even more impossible for us to know the situation over at Ming Mountain. Actually, early on in the battle, the nascent soul masters had already sent some disciples to the Huan kingdom, Zhu Qinghe said, but for some reason, although these disciples returned with news, none of them were about Ming Mountain. Ming Mountain is behind the Huan kingdom. How could the disciples of the Tao sect approach it so calmly? Zhang Fian said coldly, even if senior brother Zhu could enter the Huan Kingdom, I'm afraid it would not be easy for you to receive news about Ming Mountain, right? Sigh, indeed. Zhu Chenghe nodded. After the great battle of the Sword Catacomb, the Changbai sect also sent some disciples with sword energy to sneak into the Sword Catacomb. Unfortunately, most of them were seen through, and only a small number of them were able to send back some news. But these news were all from the Huan Kingdom near the Shi Kingdom and the Lian Kingdom. Perhaps there is also a problem between the Su Huan Kingdom and Ming Mountain? Pan Dongmin's eyes flashed with a strange light as he suddenly said, "It is not that I have not thought of this," Zhang Fian said with a bitter smile, "but the Huan Kingdom has no reason to send troops from both sides. Moreover, it is very obvious that the forces of Ming Mountain are not much weaker than the three kingdoms of the Dao sect. If they are also at war with the Huan Kingdom, how could the Huan Kingdom send so many swords here? Sigh. If only some nascent soul master could make a trip to Ming Mountain," Gu Yun sighed. "Won't we know what the situation is when we see it?" Zhang Fian laughed. "Senior brother Gu Yun, if you want to go, no one will stop you. It is a great battle now. Just like those third-grade swordmasters, although they are powerful and can fly very fast, would they dare to enter the territory of the three kingdoms alone? Would they be able to receive news from the Kueha Sea? If they dare to go to the Kueha Sea, they must be prepared to die in the Ming Kingdom." Speaking of this, Zhang Fian raised her eyebrows and looked at Gu Yun, asking, "By the way, senior brother Gu Yun, didn't Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction of the Lian Kingdom bring a few disciples to the Huan Kingdom? Is there any news?" "Oh, you mean Li Zongbao, Kai Hongxia, Xiao Mao, and Xiao Hua?" Gu Yun seemed to have realized something and said, "When I first came to Century City, I heard from the sect leader that the four of them had broken through the Sword Catacomb that day, but after that, there was no more news. It was like a clay ox entering the sea. It has been so many years. I'm afraid they are doomed." -11. Chapter 29:34. "I've heard about it too." Zhu Chenghe, who had been silent all this while, said, "Senior brother Gu Yun, I've always been puzzled. Why did these disciples break into the Sword Catacomb? Could it be the arrangement of Immortal He Ping from the Utopia faction?" Sect leader asked Immortal He Ping that year. Immortal He Ping just smiled and didn't answer. Gu Yun didn't know either. Besides, Li Zongbao's master, Heng Zhao, has returned to the Utopia faction. Even Kai Hongxia and the others' teachers have returned. No one knows what they're doing. It must be the arrangement of some nascent soul stage teacher. Zhang Fian said calmly, "Who's free to rush into the Huan Kingdom after the war?" "This. I'm not sure." Gu Yun hesitated. "If Fairy Fian wants to know." "Oh?" Zhang Fian was stunned and said curiously, "I do want to know." "Then junior sister and junior brother Dongmin should think about it carefully. Maybe we can solve this fog-like mystery and find a pool to bathe in," Gu Yun said seriously. "Senior brother." Zhang Fian blushed. Just as she was about to scold him, a voice came from the mountain wall in the distance. "Teachers, a message jade slip has arrived." Zhu Chenghe laughed so hard that he bent over. However, he was not like Gu Yun and didn't dare to be loud. He felt uncomfortable holding it in. When he heard it, he rushed to the sky and laughed. "Ha ha, good, bring it to me." Immediately, a disciple in the early stage of Foundation establishment flew in from outside the stone wall and landed outside the straw hut behind Zhu Chenghe. Zhu Chenghe landed on the ground and didn't speak to the disciple. Instead, he laughed loudly. The disciple was confused, but he didn't dare to ask and stood aside respectfully. After Zhu Chenghe finished laughing, he stretched out his hand and said, "Give it to me." "Yes." The disciple reached into his chest and took out a few jade slips and handed them to Zhu Chenghe. "Uncle, these are 9 jade slips from various places. There are 4 from the Shi Kingdom and 5 from the Lian Kingdom. Please take a look." "Good, you've worked hard." Zhu Chenghe took them and praised. "It's your credit that the message was sent in such a timely manner. After the war, I'll ask for a reward for you." "I don't dare." The disciple respectfully bowed. "We juniors are all boorish fellows. We relied on Uncle Master and the others to devise strategies for the war. Everyone will do their best." Zhu Chenghe smiled as he watched the disciple bid him farewell. With a shake of his body, he landed in the straw hut. The hut was not big, similar to an ordinary quiet room. However, every blade of grass that made up the hut was emerald green, like a piece of jade. Strands of invisible green silk strands connected the grass. If an ordinary cultivator saw this, he would be stunned, because the grass was blue sky grass, and the strands were dark green silk. Both of them had the effect of calming the mind, calming the heart, and expelling evil spirits. Ordinary cultivators would place some of them around their quiet rooms. Cultivating in such a quiet room, it was easy to calm the mind, and inner demons and other things would not come to disturb them. However, this straw hut was actually built with these two strange items. It was really rare. Zhu Chenghe entered the straw hut, walked to a jade table, and sat down. With a wave of his hand, the 9 jade slips landed on the table. He casually picked one up and carefully read it with his divine sense. As he read, his eyebrows trembled slightly, as if he was thinking. After a moment, Zhu Chenghe finished reading. Then, he raised his head and looked at the blue sky grass with some confusion. He muttered in a low voice, "Strange. Didn't the Lian country's Polonia Peak just kill thousands of swordsmen a few days ago? Why did they rush there again? Polonia Peak, Polonia Peak. It doesn't seem to have any vital points." After muttering for a moment, Zhu Chenghe raised his hand and flicked his middle finger. The jade slip flew out with a whoosh. Looking at his familiar movements, it was obvious that Zhu Chenghe often did this. "Fairy Fian, don't think about how to take a bath. Take a look at the battle report first." Ha ha ha. As Zhu Chenghe spoke, he couldn't help but laugh again. Then, he picked up another jade slip and prepared to read it. However, just as his divine sense entered it, the laughter came to an abrupt end. Even the smile froze on his face. A strange and inconceivable expression appeared in his eyes. How is this possible?" Zhu Chenghe muttered in a low voice that sounded almost like a moan. Then his eyes darted around and he glanced outside. His finger curled slightly, and the jade slip in his hand suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had never picked it up or even seen it. Of course, Zhu Chenghe's finger curled again, and another jade slip fell into his hand. However, this time, Zhu Chenghe was a little absent-minded. He seemed to have roughly looked at it, and without even thinking, he directly sent it out. Zhu Chenghe skimmed through the remaining 6 jade slips like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. He casually passed them to Jiang Fian. Then, as if he was thinking about something, he stood up and slowly paced around the straw hut. After the time it took to eat a meal, he finally raised his head and looked outside. Some of the confusion on his face had disappeared. He knew that Jiang Fian, Gu Yun, and Pandongmin had finished reading the 8 jade slips. It should be time for the 4 of them to discuss. Zhu Chenghe took a slight breath, and his expression returned to normal. He walked out of the green heavens grass and jambi silk and walked towards Jiang Fian's pavilion. Jiang Fian's pavilion was also rare. It was built with many spirit-nourishing trees. When Zhu Chenghe walked to the front of the pavilion, Gu Yun and Pandongmin had already arrived. One of them was sitting on a wooden chair with a pink wine pot in front of him. A strong flowery fragrance was emitted from the wine cup in front of the wine pot. The faint pink wine brew was as intoxicating as the red lips of a beautiful woman. The other one was standing with his hands behind his back and facing outside the pavilion. He seemed to be looking at the clouds and the foothills. Jiang Fian was sitting behind a jade table. There was a 6-string zither on the table. However, at this moment, Jiang Fian's hand was gently pressing on the zither's strings. Her fingers were moving intermittently, but there was no sound. The 8 jade slips were scattered in front of the 6-string zither. Senior brother Gu Yun is in such a good mood. Zhu Chenghe glanced at Gu Yun, who was holding a wine cup, and said with a smile, "Your beautiful lips have flushed the Tiantai fragrance out of the 9 heavens in an instant." Gu Yun pursed his lips and looked at the small tea stove on the wooden table behind Pandongmin. He looked at the small red charcoal fire under the tea stove and said in annoyance, "In this state, it should be green ant fresh wine and red clay stove to cook dog meat. How can the Tiantai fragrance that's so bland that birds come out of the mouth be completed?" "Humph." Jiang Fian raised her eyebrows and said coldly, "Senior brother Gu Yun, are you saying that I'm spoiling the fun?" All right then, I'll return to the Naming sect now. Senior brothers, you can enjoy yourselves again. Don't, don't, don't. Gu Yun hurriedly waved his hand and drank a mouthful of wine. He said, if you leave, won't others change your name to Jiang Hongyan in their hearts? Zhu Chenghe naturally understood the message sent by Hongyan. He immediately understood that Gu Yun was alluding to Pan Dongmin again. Senior brother, Zhang Fian was a little anxious and stood up. Ahem, Zhu Chenghe knew that it was time for him to speak up. He hurriedly coughed twice and sat on the wooden table behind Pan Dongmin. He said, Senior brother Gu Yun is an elegant person. We're just ordinary people. Let's enjoy the Tiantai fragrance. Fairy Fian, he's obviously envious of us. Why are you still arguing with him? Humph, Zhang Fian was given a way out. She pouted and sat down. She still glanced at Pan Dongmin's back. When Zhu Chenghe picked up his teacup and took a sip, Pan Dongmin beside him said softly, Junior brother Zhu, the messages that are coming in are getting more and more complicated. Have you noticed anything? Sigh, I just don't understand. That's why I'm here to listen to everyone's opinions, Zhu Chenghe said with a bitter smile. The things in these jade slips are all over the place. I can't see anything special at all. They're all ordinary troop arrangements. There's even some extremely useless things. I'm having a headache just looking at them. Is that so? Pan Dongmin turned around and looked at Zhu Chenghe in confusion. Is that so? Zhu Chenghe felt a little guilty for no reason and asked in confusion, what about senior brother Gu Yun? Pan Dongmin shifted his gaze away from Zhu Chenghe and looked at Gu Yun. Gu Yun took another sip of wine and said calmly, I feel that today's messages are very strange. They're all pointless troop deployments. But it's really so boring. They've already revealed the intentions of the sword cultivators. That's right. Zhang Fian, who was beside him, also made up an excuse. After reading it, I feel that the sword cultivators are about to bare their fangs. This, Zhu Chenghe's face was slightly red. He really didn't check it carefully and thought that it was the same as the previous messages. He didn't expect that the three of them had already reached a consensus. However, Pan Dongmin didn't ask much. He only said in a low voice, I also feel that it's a little strange. The actions of the sword cultivators this time are really messy. It feels like they're trying to cover it up. It's different from all the previous arrangements of the sword cultivators. Yes, or rather, it's only this time that it gives I a familiar feeling. It's as if the previous movements weren't the arrangements of the sword cultivators. Only this time, it's the real movements of the sword cultivators. Sigh, it's a pity that I still can't see any specific movements from the messages in the jade slips. The goal of the sword cultivators, we still can't be sure. Even LV Ruochang, who commanded the first stage of the war, actually left the sword tomb and returned to Huan Kingdom. In the previous few years, although LV Ruochang didn't directly participate in the war, he's always been guarding the sword tomb. I have an extremely bad feeling, Zhang Fian said seriously. The goal of the sword cultivators will definitely stun us. Maybe LV Ruochang is preparing for this. I hope that our arrangements will be of some use. I also hope that we can find the nine-eyed hot spring behind the fog before the sword cultivators launch their final attack. Pan Dongmin turned again and looked at the dreamy fog in the distance. Oh right, senior brother Zhu, where's the other jade slips? Zhang Fian suddenly asked. Chapter 29:35. Oh. Zhu Chenghe was shocked. His expression was a little unnatural. He rolled his eyes and asked curiously, How did you know? Hee, don't joke with me. Zhang Fian pointed at the jade slip in front of her and said with a smile, It's written clearly in this jade slip. This time, 9 jade slips were sent. Senior brother Zhu, did you not see them? Hee. Zhu Chenghe smiled faintly. He waved his hand and took out the jade slip. He handed it to Zhang Fian and said, The information in this jade slip is a little strange, so I took it out alone to discuss with the three of you. Oh? Zhang Fian raised her eyebrows and asked curiously, What's so special about the information in this jade slip? Take a look for yourself. Zhu Chenghe said with a smile. Weren't you asking just now? Where did LV Ruochang go? There are some clues in this jade slip. Although Jiang Fian was a little surprised and did not understand Zhu Qinghe's actions today, she did not have any special suspicions. Moreover, when she immersed her divine thought in and saw it, she threw her doubts away. What? The Swordmaster of the Black Phoenix Sword Sect issued the Swordmaster command? He went to Drifting Cloud Lake to kill the cultivator with the surname Xiao? Yes. Zhu Qinghe took advantage of the situation and said, all the information in this jade slip is similar to the information in the other 8 jade slips. They are all deceiving themselves. However, this piece of information is mixed in, and it's so obvious. This Shu suspects that this is a trap. That's why I took it out to discuss with you. The jade slip was passed between Gu Yun and Pan Dongmin. Both of them looked at it and then frowned slightly. They looked at each other and suddenly understood. Junior brother Zhu, I think that this information should be true. Gu Yun said faintly, this information was sent by our cultivator's secret pawn in the sword tomb. Moreover, the way he got the information was normal. What's more, when he got the information, it was when LV Ruochang left the sword tomb. These 2 pieces of information corroborated each other and should prove that both pieces of information are true. Hee, it's precisely because both of them are so coincidental that I just thought that the message was sent here. That's why I'm so suspicious and feel that there's something fishy going on. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. It must be a trap set up by the swordsmen here. They want to draw our attention away from their target. Speaking up to this point, Zhu Qinghe said confidently, the fact that they are trying to cover up so much shows that our previous actions must have already found the sword cultivator's vital point, and they have no choice but to cover it up. But the vital point that we found, where is it? No, this information is correct. Jiang Fian shook her head firmly. If they wanted to set up a trap, they would have set it up near the sword tomb. How could they set it up directly at the Flowing Cloud Lake? That Flowing Cloud Lake was far away in Huan country. How can cultivators like us go there? Oh, Zhu Qinghe frowned. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, it may not be as simple as Junior's sister thinks. The cultivator's surname Xiao must be Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua is with Li Zongbao from the Utopia sect. Jiang Fian did not wait for Zhu Qinghe to finish speaking. Her fingers flicked on the 6-string zither, and a sharp sound rang out. Li Zongbao and the others actually broke through the blockade of Huan country, and they even entered millions of Ming mountains. How did they do it? And that Black Phoenix Sword Sect Swordmaster actually issued the Swordmaster command. It seems like they have already attracted the attention of the sword cultivators. This matter is definitely fishy? Fairy Fian, you mean? Gu Yun asked with a serious expression. However, Jiang Fian did not pay attention to Gu Yun. She seemed to have thought of something. Her eyes stared straight at the 6-string zither in front of her, and her brows were tightly knitted. Go and save them, Pan Dongmin said straightforwardly. What the sword cultivators want to do is what we want to stop. What's more, Li Zongbao and the others are the heroes of the great battle of Dao and Sword. If the other disciples know that we have received the news but do not go and save them, what will they think? Their hearts will definitely turn cold. I object to sending the participating disciples to save them. Zhu Qinghe frowned and said, even if this news is true, the participating nascent soul stage masters have the entire battle under control. If they leave, I'm afraid it will be disadvantageous to the battle. Moreover, this news is more than a month ago. Even if Zhenren Heping of the Utopia faction wants to save them, I'm afraid it will be too late. If we don't send the participating disciples, let the disciples of Shi country go. Pan Dongmin replied without hesitation. Gu Yun nodded. Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction is the flag of the great battle. We must not let him fall. Since Huan country wants to send the non-participating swordsmen to kill them, then our Dao sect will also send non-participating cultivators to save them. Sky Patrol City. It's Sky Patrol City. Jiang Fian, who had been pondering, suddenly relaxed her brows. An indescribable glory radiated from her not-so-beautiful face. It was a kind of confidence, a kind of pride. Sky Patrol City? Gu Yun, Zhu Qinghe, and Pan Dongmin were all stunned. They looked at each other, and there was a trace of understanding on their faces. Yes, Sky Patrol City is a bright lamp in the dark night. illuminating the battle between Shi country and Huan country. Under the brilliance of this bright lamp, we are searching for the mystery of this battle. However, we have forgotten the source of this brilliance. As long as the sword cultivator of Huan country takes down Sky Patrol City, the entire battle will fall into darkness, and we will inevitably fall into a passive state. Zhang Fian explained with a smile of exultation, but Zhu Chenghe still disagreed. He shook his head and said, "It's not that we haven't discussed the Sky Patrol City before, but we always rejected it. The Sky Patrol City has never lost in any of the previous wars. Not in the past doesn't mean it won't in the future." Zhang Fian's tone was a little high-pitched, and she seemed to be extremely dissatisfied with Zhu Chenghe's distrust of her. Maybe the sword cultivator has never had the means to take down Sky Patrol City in one fell swoop, so he has been delaying the battle. Pan Dongmin heard Zhang Fian's high-pitched voice and frowned slightly. There was a trace of displeasure in his eyes, but he still said, "Junior brother Zhu, I remember a long time ago when you were at Floating Duckweed Mountain with your sect leader Bai Kongzi and sect leader Sun Yunzi. The sect leader of Jinghua sect, Quangtian Zhenren of the Imperial Thunder sect, received a message from our disciples, saying that the sword cultivator's ultimate goal is Sky Patrol City, right?" Zhu Chenghe smiled faintly and nodded. Indeed. At this time, Quangtian Zhenren of the Imperial Thunder sect and Qian Diheng have been brooding over it. I have also reported this matter to all of you, and everyone treated it as a joke that day. Well, now it seems that we were really wrong. The one who sent this message is probably Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder sect, the Foundation establishment disciple who was with Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction. All of this is true, but I don't know how they got this news. This is absolutely incredible. Zhang Fian sighed. Why didn't I think of it that day? If I had set up a backup plan back then, why not? Gu Yuan raised his eyebrows. We have already left disciples to guard Sky Patrol City, and the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect and Mo Sang Mountain are also in the city. Even the two nascent soul early-stage masters outside the city are keeping an eye on it. Moreover, the judgment at that time could only be regarded as unfounded and impossible. If this message was sent now, or a while ago, we would naturally understand, and we wouldn't have become a joke. What are you waiting for? Pan Dongmin had already turned around and ordered, since we feel confident, let's quickly inform the nascent soul stage masters and mobilize the troops. Yes, and Li Zongbao's matter. Gu Yun didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly got up. If Heping Zhenren knows that just as he said this, he heard the sound of wind above the foothills. A rainbow streaked across the distance and rushed to the sky above the nine-eyed hot spring in the blink of an eye. Oh no, it's the nascent soul stage masters. Gu Yun's cultivation was the highest. He had already sensed it and hurriedly rushed out of the pavilion. Sure enough, where the rainbow landed, a nascent soul middle-stage cultivator appeared. It was Yun Mengzi from the Changbai sect. At this time, Yun Mengzi's face was extremely gloomy. The sword light around his body was produced from time to time, like a dragon swimming around the surface of his body. Greetings, Martial Uncle Yun Mengzi. Gu Yun saw Yun Mengzi's expression and knew that something was wrong. He immediately asked while bowing, "Martial Uncle, you came in a hurry. Could it be that Sky Patrol City has fallen into the enemy's hands?" "Oh, you already know the sword cultivator's intention?" Yun Mengzi raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise. That's right. Pan Dongmin, Zhu Chenghe, and Zhang Fian had already bowed to Yun Mengzi at this time and hurriedly said, "We have already noticed the abnormality from the recent news, and we're about to inform the disciples to send a message to the masters." Yun Mengzi looked at the four of them, and then at the many Foundation establishment disciples flying in from outside the mountain. He smiled bitterly and said, "Of course, Sky Patrol City has not fallen into the hands of the sword cultivator." Phew! Zhu Chenghe and the other three heaved a long sigh of relief. They looked at each other with a look of relief in their eyes. But Yun Mengzi changed the topic. All the sword cultivator swordsmen have abandoned their targets and madly rushed to Sky Patrol City. There are so many swordsmen attacking Sky Patrol City so openly. We are afraid that Sky Patrol City will fall. It's good that Sky Patrol City has not fallen yet. Zhang Fian smiled and said, We have already set up a trap near Sky Patrol City. It should be effective. At the very least, the 4 nascent Soul Realm seniors from the Celestial City, Senior Shuiyu, Imperial Thunder Sect, and Mo Sang Mountain will be able to resist for a while with the help of the Celestial City's formation. When the True Path Sect disciples arrive, we will defeat the Sword Cultivator with the help of the Celestial City's disciples. Alright, since the Martial Nephews have already decided, let's hurry up and leave. Yun Mengzi sighed and said, looking at the madness of the Sword Cultivator, this battle is already the final blow. We cannot afford to be negligent. -11. Chapter 29:36. Yes, we'll follow Martial Uncle's arrangement. Everyone bowed. Yun Mengzi didn't delay. With a wave of her hand, a rainbow covered the 4 of them. A rainbow flashed under Yun Mengzi's feet, and several people quickly rushed into the sky and disappeared. As for Jiang Fian's request to send a message to the sects in the country of Shi, hoping that they would send their disciples to fight against the Sword Cultivators and rescue Li Zongbao and the others from the Sword Cultivators' attack, the 4 of them had already forgotten about it. After all, their safety compared to the Sky Patrol City was too insignificant. Xiaohua naturally didn't know about this. He was still sitting cross-legged in the quiet room. Right now, it had already been several days since he started recording the cloud-traversing rain summoning technique. Without anyone's guidance, Xiaohua finally recorded the 36 green seal characters into his bones one by one according to the instructions in the soul technique Zi Ming gave him. Although Xiaohua was unbearably tired, his mental strength was also greatly exhausted. But the harvest was extremely rich. Not only did Xiaohua have a deeper understanding of the green seal characters, but the flexibility of the soul strands were also much better than before. Xiaohua was even confident that if he was given another 10 days, he would absolutely comprehend the green seal characters given to him by Elder Wu. However, just as Xiaohua put away the bone and rested for a few days, a guard called from outside again. Xiaohua didn't even think about it. He immediately removed the capital star array and walked out of the quiet room. He knew that today must be the auspicious day for Zi Ming to light the soul-extinguishing lamp. He couldn't delay this lantern-burning ceremony. Sure enough, when the dark-skinned guard saw Xiaohua come out, he immediately bowed and greeted him. Similarly, he spoke fluently in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation respectfully. Young Master Xiao, tonight is the lantern-burning ceremony of Miss Zi Ming of the Hutu Stockade. This humble one is specially ordered by Elder Wu to invite young master. Good. Xiaohua nodded. Looking at the sky outside, it was dusk. Presumably, Zi Ming's lantern-burning ceremony would be held at midnight. This way, please. The guard bowed and extended his hand, inviting Xiaohua to walk in a direction. You lead the way. Xiaohua looked at the somewhat gloomy corridor and asked again, where are the other senior brothers of this Xiao? Shall we go together? Reporting to young master, the imperial bodyguard followed Xiaohua's instructions and walked to the front. He bowed slightly and turned his head. Young Master Li, young Master Xiao, and the others have already left. In order to show our respect to the distinguished guests, Elder Wu instructed us to invite you one by one. Young Master, I was the first to arrive. However, because young Master was in seclusion, I waited for a while. I believe the other guards have already invited young Master Li and the others over. Xiaohua casually nodded. He followed the guard through the layers of shadows. The dusk gradually became heavier, shrouding the many palaces in Huta village, giving birth to a heavy feeling. Walking in this heavy atmosphere made Xiaohua feel like he couldn't bear the burden. As he was walking, an old maidservant suddenly appeared from the side of a palace door and blocked the guard's path. The guard was obviously stunned, then immediately bowed. Without waiting for him to speak, that servant girl raised her voice and said, Xiaohua, young Master Xiao, my family's G-man has a matter to ask. Young Master Xiao, please follow this humble one. Oh? Xiaohua raises his eyebrows. He looks at the servant girl from head to toe and says coldly, is G-Manda in this Huta stronghold? Or is it Elder Wu? Naturally, it's Elder Wu. The servant girl's face is slightly angry, even if Elder Wu is more honorable than my family's G-man. You can't disobey G-man's orders. What a joke. Xiaohua doesn't want to see G-Man at this time. He waves his hand and says, "This Xiao is going to the Dipankara ceremony under Elder Wu's orders. If G-Man wants to see this Xiao, please come to the Dipankara ceremony." Impudent. The servant girl is furious. She seems to have never seen someone like Xiaohua who doesn't put G-Man in his eyes. Young Master Xiao. At this time, a faint voice comes from the palace behind the servant girl. Greetings to G-Man. The guard hurriedly bows and greets, his face carrying a trace of embarrassment. It's G-Man's dignified and irrefutable tone. Greetings to G-Man. Xiaohua also bows and says, "Forgive this junior for being rude, but this should be Zi Ming's Dipankara ceremony. Lord G-Man and this junior should appear at the ceremony on time. Even if G-Man doesn't want to go, this junior can't delay." The Dipankara ceremony is my Huta village's most important ceremony, and it hasn't been held for many years. As G-Man, how can this old one be delayed on such an occasion? Actually, if this old one isn't here, this Dipankara ceremony, G-Man says halfway, then changes the topic. However, it's still early to the Dipankara ceremony. Just like when you went to the Netherworld Eye with Ziyi, you were able to rescue Elder Jilon and find the Netherworld bamboo in this period of time. Can't this old one ask you a few questions? Hearing G-Man mention the Netherworld Eye, it seems to be a threat. Thinking about Zi Ming and the Dipankara ceremony that is close at hand, Xiaohua nods and says with a smile, since G-Man wants to go to the ceremony with this junior in a while, this junior also hopes to listen to senior's teachings. And, come in. G-Man's voice is faint. The two of you stay here and guard. Yes. That maid fiercely glares at Xiaohua, and the guard also helplessly stands at the side of the hall door. Xiaohua walks into the hall and sees G-Man standing in the middle of the hall. At this time, G-Man is dressed in splendid clothes. There are several layers of decorations on her head like a flower crown, and there are many thumb-sized white bones around her neck. Her clothes look very complicated, and there are many layers of strange patterns and tassels all over her body. Xiaohua can't help but stare blankly at her. Young Master Xiao. G-Man doesn't care about Xiaohua's gaze and directly asks, "Which great scholar's disciple are you?" Great scholar? Xiaohua stares blankly, somewhat baffled. What's a great scholar? This junior doesn't understand? G-Man frowns slightly and says indifferently, "Young Master Xiao, since you are familiar with Zi Ming, you must have heard her mention it. This old one has a longing for the path of Confucianism, and this shaman stockade also has the legacy of Confucianism. Since there are some changes in your middle dantian, and you even asked this old one for the inheritance of Confucianism, could it be that you are not a disciple of Confucianism?" Xiaohua suddenly understands. Although he knows that G-Man has already left the ancestral hall before he asked Elder Wu to search for the seal on his middle dantian, he also believes that even if G-Man didn't know the secret of the seal on his middle dantian from Elder Wu, she can also know that he is asking Elder Wu for help regarding his middle dantian. From these two aspects, it is normal for G-Man to infer that he is a Confucianism. However, Xiaohua naturally has to deny it. G-Man misunderstands. This junior thought that I was more curious about Confucianism, and in my early years in Shi Country's Jinghua City, I saw a descendant of Confucianism, especially when I heard that G-Man has the inheritance of Confucianism, so I asked for it. As for this junior, I am a genuine disciple of Taoism. Shi Country's Jinghua City? G-Man frowns. Which great Confucian's descendant is that? Hee, Lord G-Man, this is Junior's secret. It is not convenient to tell Senior. Xiaohua flatly refuses. Sigh, young Master Xiao. G-Man sighs. Are you still so guarded against this old woman? Senior, what are you talking about? Xiaohua says with a smile. You are the influential figure of Hutu Stronghold, second only to one person and above tens of thousands. This junior is only a passerby of Hutu Stronghold, completely unrelated to Senior. There is no need to be guarded against. Sigh, Xiaohua. G-Man is not satisfied with Xiaohua's explanation and sighs again. This old woman knows that this matter is my fault. I almost sent you, Zi Ming and the others, into the arms of Huda Great God. However, you should also put yourself in this old woman's shoes. Lu is this old woman's legitimate son. He is the candidate for Elder Wu of Hutu Stronghold, How can this old woman not be anxious about his death? Back then, when this old woman and Ziming's mother were fighting over G-Man, there were some differences, but Ziming's mother was one step ahead and was chosen by Elder Wu, and this old woman was not chosen. What G-Man did to this old woman that day, there is no need for this old woman to explain in detail. In the words of your Tao sect, the dead are the most important. Even if this old woman said it, you would not believe it. Later on, Ziming's mother entered the arms of Huta Great God. Ziming was too young to succeed G-Man. So this old woman once again took over the position of G-Man. But at that time, the soul-falling lamp had already been bestowed to Ziming by Elder Wu. Although Lu had the qualifications to be Elder Wu, these qualifications fell behind Ziming and Ziyi. At that time, Lu was extremely sensible. Under this old woman's persuasion, he did not put the position of Elder Wu in his eyes. But what about Ziming? She took G-Man's position as her own. She saw Lu as her enemy. Even when Ziyi returned to the arms of Huta Great God, she did not report this matter. She still let Ziyin be ranked after Ziyi, who no longer exists. This old woman already knew about this matter. But this old woman did not point it out. This old woman even tried to cover it up for her. This old woman knew what she was thinking. She wanted to take back the position of G-Man that belonged to her mother. In fact, although this old woman coveted G-Man's position, it was also for the sake of my Hutu village. That year, if it was not for Ziming being too young and unable to take over G-Man's position, this old woman would definitely have rejected Elder Wu. This old woman's tolerance time and time again. I did not expect that Ziming would repay kindness with enmity. Xiao Hua, if you were in her place, and you heard that your family was killed, and this ending was what you had been worried about all this time, how would you react? Facing G-Man's questioning and confession, Xiao Hua was silent. That day, G-Man was truly crazy, almost taking the lives of Xiao Hua and the others. But today, after hearing G-Man's words, Xiao Hua also understood the hardships of being a mother. As the village's G-Man, that's right, this old woman did scold Ziming's mother. But Ziming's mother scolded this old woman 100 times more vicious than that day. Seeing that Xiao Hua did not answer, G-Man continued, and this old woman wanted to kill all of you. But that was because this old woman did not know the specific reason. She thought that you were the culprits who killed my Lu'er. Xiao Hua, think about it, even at that time, Ziming did not take out the soul bead. She actually suspected this old woman to that extent. This old woman's heart is still in pain. -11. Chapter 29:37. Hutu village is the descendant of Hutu Great God. Ziming, Ziyi, Ziyin, and a few other juniors have inherited the bloodline of Hutu Great God, and their bloodline is very pure. It is not as complicated as the bloodline of Shibai village, and it is not as chaotic as the other shaman villages. In my opinion, since Huta village is in the hands of me and Grand Shaman, we should focus on unity and harmony. We must stick to our familial ties and overcome the most difficult obstacle in Ming Mountains. As for whether Ziming becomes G-Man or Ziyi becomes Grand Shaman, it doesn't matter. After all, they are the descendant of Hutu Great God. Besides, Grand Shaman and G-Man don't have much conflict. When G-Man reached this point, she paused for a moment and continued. Ziming is wary of me because he wants power. Oh? The bloodline of Shibai village is thin? The conflict of shaman villages? Xiao Hua was slightly startled. He understood what G-Man was trying to say, but he didn't want to get involved too deeply. He frowned and asked curiously. Humph. G-Man said coldly, if not for the thin bloodline of Huta Great God, how could Xiao Mao gain the respect of the people of Bailu village when he came to Ming Mountains? How could he gain the loyalty of Bailu village's Grand Shaman and G-Man? Xiao Mao's arrival is really timely. It is like a drop of cold water falling into boiling oil. The chaos of Shibai village is getting more and more disorderly. To be honest with young Master Xiao, when I saw Xiao Mao, I already had the intention to kill him. With his existence, Shibai village will most likely be divided. Is this the reason why you and Grand Shaman didn't want to do anything? Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat, and he said calmly, actually, you and Grand Shaman know about Xiao Mao's background? No. G-Man shook her head and said, What I said to Grand Shaman is the truth. We really don't know about Xiao Mao's background. Besides, that killing intent was something I used to maintain the stability of Ming Mountains. Now that I know you are Taoist Xiao Mao, I'm afraid he was sent here by Great God Shibai. Since this is the will of Great God Shibai, why should I care about him? Then, Xiao Hua glanced at G-Man. He understood that this G-Man was an old woman who placed the safety of Hutu stronghold and even Ming Mountains as her #1 priority. Perhaps she had some complaints about Ziming, but she would never act as Ziming thought and kill him ruthlessly. In fact, after knowing the truth behind Ziyan's death, she didn't resent Ziming and Xiao Mao too much. Perhaps, because of Ziming's words, Xiao Hua had misunderstood her. Of course, Xiao Hua also knew that his understanding was only his understanding. The real truth was probably only known to the Huta god. Following which, Xiao Hua asked respectfully, with G-Man's thoughts, what will Xiao Mao do? Oh, do you really want to listen to this old woman's opinion? G-Man asked curiously. Yes, please explain, Senior. Xiao Hua replied sincerely. It's simple. G-Man said, if you're strong, you'll have the shaman village in your heart. If you're weak, you'll have to be independent. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua finally understood. Of course, since Venerable Wu has promised young Master Xiao, I believe he will have some discussions with Venerable Wu of Shi by Stronghold. Young Master Xiao, what can you do if you wait for Venerable Wu's news? G-Man said again. Thank you, Senior. Xiao Hua bowed. Then, can you be honest with this old woman now? Which family of Confucian cultivators are you? G-Man finally asked again. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and told her about his encounter with the descendants of Zhu clan in Jinghua City. After listening to Xiao Hua's explanation, G-Man's face was filled with desolation. She sighed and said, according to the records in the inscription on the armor, when Confucian cultivators were flourishing, the Zhu clan was a clan that could stand up to the emperor. But now, they have been reduced to such a miserable state because of that talisman. How pitiful. G-Man, you said that this talisman was originally a method of your Ming Mountains. How could it be used to curse the descendants of Confucian cultivators? Xiao Hua couldn't understand. The green seal script is the essence of heaven and earth. If it was one of the 12 great gods, G-Man shook her head slightly and said, originally, it could only be used by the descendants of the 12 great gods through the power of their bloodline. However, the heavenly Tao has changed. Soul cultivators are not the only powerful ones. Taoist sects, Buddhist sects, Confucian cultivators, and so on are all rising. Even young Master Xiao is able to use the green seal script, right? If young Master Xiao is the one who uses this talisman, as long as young Master Xiao is not afraid of exhausting his life essence, he can also use it as a curse. Then tell me, how would this old woman know who cursed the descendants of Zhu clan? This junior understands. Xiao Hua bowed and said, actually, with young Master Zhao's benevolence, it suits the righteousness of Confucian cultivators. You should be an excellent successor of Confucian cultivators. G-Man said regretfully, unfortunately, young Master has already joined Taoist sects. Confucian cultivators are not accepted by Taoist sects. If this old woman passes the legacy of Confucian cultivators to young Master, it will be harming young Master. Moreover, young Master already has the cultivation base of Taoist sects. If young Master continues to cultivate Confucian cultivators, he will definitely be distracted. Not only will his cultivation base not improve, it will even cause conflicts and delay young Master's growth. It's fine. Xiao Hua said with a smile, it's all fate. It's good that young Master understands. G-Man raised her eyes and looked outside the hall. It's already late. Young Master, you don't have to leave early, but this old woman has to leave. Today's matter will be remembered in young Master's heart. You don't have to tell Ziming a single word. The more you say, the more she feels that this is this old woman's trick. Hee, G-Man, you're too naive. Seeing this, Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. He knew that this was an extremely good opportunity. He would rather bet on the kindness of the human heart, so he said with a smile. Oh, what do you mean? G-Man was obviously stunned. G-Man, Please take a look. Xiao Hua said as he clapped his hands and took out the rejuvenation pill. He said with a smile, Zimming asked this junior to pass this to G-Man. Ah, rejuvenation pill? G-Man was obviously shocked. Joy appeared on her face, but she immediately smiled bitterly. Young Master Xiao must be joking. This originally belonged to young Master. You're helping Zimming to cover up his lie, right? Xiao Hua naturally thought that G-Man was not so easily deceived. His mind quickly turned and he said, Senior, you're wrong. This rejuvenation pill is Junior's, but Junior doesn't have it anymore. This rejuvenation pill was given to Zimming by Junior. Even if you gave it to Zimming, it was because you used the green seal text. Zimming returned this rejuvenation pill to you to replenish your life essence. G-Man was indeed perceptive and did not hide it. Senior, you're too confident. You were still talking about Zimming earlier. How could you make such a mistake? Xiao Hua still said calmly, this rejuvenation pill was given to Junior by Zimming when he entered the Netherworld Eye with Junior. Oh. G-Man's eyes lit up. When Zimming gave the rejuvenation pill to Xiao Hua, G-Man was not in the ancestral hall. Elder Wu naturally would not tell this to G-Man that day. Zimming said clearly that after tonight, there would be no more Zai in this world. What's the use of this rejuvenation pill? Thinking about G-Man's love for me, I might as well use this rejuvenation pill to exchange for her favor. Xiao Hua said word by word. However, this rejuvenation pill, Zimming did not give Junior the Netherworld Eye to Senior. When would that be? G-Man asked. If Zimming returned to Hutu God's embrace because of Zimming's matter, it would be the time for this rejuvenation pill to be given to G-Man. If Zimming lit up the soul-falling lamp because of Elder Wu, it would also be the time for this rejuvenation pill to be given to G-Man. Xiao Hua cleverly changed Zimming's words and said with a smile, since today is the time for Zimming to light up the soul-falling lamp, Junior will give this rejuvenation pill to G-Man according to Zimming's words. This child is just like her mother. G-Man sighed slightly, even if she wants to curry favor with others. But she doesn't let others know of her own suffering. And her mouth is also unforgiving. It's good that G-Man knows. Xiao Hua said with a smile, sometimes, it's because we're familiar with each other that we neglect the most precious thing. At the same time, when we think that we're familiar with each other, we always feel that we know each other, so we don't communicate. But in reality, we might have misunderstood each other. Thinking about this, if G-Man and Zimming were honest with each other, there wouldn't be any misunderstandings. Even if there were Devil Cultivator's possession, there wouldn't even be a chance for Devil Cultivator to take advantage of it. Young Master Xiao is right. G-Man nodded. This old one is older and thought that blindly enduring would be able to make Zimming understand. It seems like it's all this old one's fault. If there's a mistake, then change it, as long as there's a chance. Xiao Hua said again, don't wait until there's no chance. Even if you want to change it, you won't be able to. Good. This old one understands. This old one also thanks young Master Xiao for reminding me. G-Man nodded and looked at the rejuvenation pill in Xiao Hua's hand. As for this pill, if G-Man doesn't take it, how can Zimming get rid of the knot in his heart? Xiao Hua flicked his hand, and the rejuvenation pill landed in front of G-Man. Forget it. This is that girl's filial piety. How can this old one not know how to return the favor? G-Man was a little puzzled in her heart, but the temptation of this rejuvenation pill was too great. She didn't think too much about it and took the rejuvenation pill and said with a smile, Zimming's lantern ceremony is about to begin. This old one will leave first. G-Man, please. Xiao Hua stepped to the side and let G-Man go first. G-Man walked past Xiao Hua and nodded with an elegant smile. When she walked out of the hall, she turned around and said with a smile, Young Master Xiao, you have to hurry over too. Zimming has been waiting for this moment for a long time. Yes, this junior understands. I will definitely not let G-Man and Zimming wait for too long. Xiao Hua also nodded with a smile. The guards who were waiting outside the palace were a little nervous. They had been thinking about how to report to the old witch if something happened to Xiao Hua. But when they saw Xiao Hua come out safely, and even G-Man who was walking in front of him was so amiable, they were so shocked that they couldn't close their mouths. As for the servant girl, her eyeballs were about to fall out. She understood in her heart that although G-Man could be considered amiable and approachable, but to treat people like this, it seemed to be the first time she saw it. Although the two of them didn't understand, one of them hurriedly followed G-Man, while the other still led Xiao Hua forward with suspicion. These two people, N plus G-Man, seemed to not know that Xiao Hua was worried about his gains and losses. -11. Chapter 29:38. Yes, after all, Xiao Hua had given this rejuvenation pill to G-Man on his own initiative. This was an absolute gamble. Xiao Hua was well aware of the effect this pill had on a woman, and the effect it would have on Ziming. The reason why Ziming didn't want to give this pill to G-Man was because he was afraid that G-Man would be filled with vitality and regain her youth, allowing her to sit in the position of G-Man for a longer period of time. In this way, even if Ziming lit up the soul-setting lamp, she would never be able to get the position of G-Man. Since he couldn't get G-Man, wouldn't Ziming's soul-setting lamp be lit in vain? Wouldn't Ziming's years of hard work be wasted in vain? However, the conflict between G-Man and Ziming had been brewing for many years, and now it had reached its peak, and the conflict had officially broken out. In Xiaohua's opinion, if nothing unexpected happened, there would be many more conflicts like this in the future. Not to mention that Ziming, who was determined to get the position of G-Man, would be on guard against and alienate G-Man. Even G-Man, an elder, would also set up a dam in her heart, pushing Ziming away from her concern. And the best time to ease this conflict, to resolve this conflict, was now. The time when everything was not completely clear yet. And the only way to resolve this conflict was for one of them to take a step back. Actually, it might not be just one step, but half a step was enough. Although it was only half a step, G-Man's dignity and her injuries had determined that she would not take a step back, and the young and vigorous Ziming would also find it hard to take a step back. Therefore, Xiaohua had no choice but to take a step back for Ziming. Coincidentally, Ziming's last rejuvenation pill was in Xiaohua's hand, and Xiaohua took it out in a flash of inspiration. Sigh, there are many precious things in this world: power, youth, life, kinship. Any of them are hard to give up, but giving them up doesn't mean losing them. By giving up power, you will get kinship and the stability of Hutu stronghold. If Ziming knew about my painstaking efforts, perhaps he might not blame me, right? Although Xiaohua was clear about this, and he also hoped that the kinship in G-Man's heart could continue, he was after all not Ziming. Walking in the dark corridor, there was an indescribable feeling in his heart. Looking at the silhouette of the palace, which looked like a huge monster in the night, he sighed in his heart. Although Hutu's stronghold had a large number of people, and was one of the strongest powers in Ming Mountains, it was facing many internal and external troubles as well. While Xiaohua was pondering, he followed the guard to the back of the mountain. The back of the mountain was filled with guards. There were spirit beasts flying in the air, and each of the guards was holding a strange lantern. The flame in the lantern emitted a green light that illuminated the entire mountain. Xiaohua understood that the Dipankarapan would be held in the ancestral hall of the Hutu stockade. Sure enough, as the guards led Xiaohua through the mountain path, the guards holding lanterns on the mountain path all stared at Xiaohua with unusual vigilance. Even when Xiaohua arrived at the entrance of the ancestral shrine, he still felt countless piercing gazes following him. "Young Master Xiao, please wait a moment." That guard very politely asked Xiaohua to wait, while he himself took out a thumb-sized transparent skull and walked in front of the ancestral shrine's gate. There were already several dozen guards wearing pitch-black armor, standing in several rows on both sides of the gate. This was the first time Xiaohua saw this armor. It looked very cumbersome, and it covered the guard's head, face, body, and other parts. Moreover, outside the thick armor, there were tendons as thick as a thumb. The surface of the armor looked like the soul runes that were drawn on the skin of the spirit warriors. Occasionally, a dark green beast head would appear where the tendons were. The guard handed over the skull and whispered a few words to the guard who came to greet him. Then, he led the guard to Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Young Master Xiao, I can only escort you up to here. Please follow this palace guard into the ancestral shrine. Venerable Wu should be waiting inside." Okay, thank you. Xiao Hua nodded lightly and expressed his thanks. The palace guard looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at the skull in his hand. He waved his hand, indicating Xiao Hua to follow him. Then he turned around and walked away. Xiao Hua didn't say anything and walked up a few steps. Just as he followed the palace guard up the stairs, there was a burst of noise behind him. A slightly louder voice shouted, "Venerable Wu of Shibai Village has arrived." The steps that were originally filled with people walking up and down suddenly quieted down. Then, everyone hurriedly moved to the sides of the steps. The palace guard who led Xiao Hua also stopped and moved to the side. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then followed the crowd and moved away. After standing firm, Xiao Hua turned his head to look. He heard the sound of the mountain path. Among the dozen or so burly guards wearing the same pitch-black armor as the palace guard, a thin and tall old man quickly walked over. This old man's skin was yellow, and he was dressed very solemnly. On his white bearded face, there was a pair of thin and long eyes that were slightly narrowed. The old man's face was also thin and long. His thin lips were tightly shut, and the wrinkles that seemed to have been carved by a knife covered his cheeks and forehead. A kind of coldness, calmness, and pressure was emitted from this old man's body. No one dared to look at him, let alone approach him. Following the old man's silent footsteps and the palace guard's heavy footsteps, everyone who passed by bowed and saluted, their faces filled with extreme respect. The old man acted as if he didn't hear this, and his eyelids didn't even move, until he walked up the steps of the Ho-Tu village's ancestral temple. At this time, there were more than 10 people standing respectfully on the steps. All of the people of Ho-Tu village bowed and saluted. Even the palace guard wearing pitch-black armor raised his right arm as if he was saluting. Only Xiao Hua stood there with his arms folded, indifferently looking at the venerable Wu. Xiao Hua was originally thin and tall, and when he stood next to the palace guard, he was half a head taller than the palace guard. Now that everyone was saluting, he was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Even if the venerable Wu of Shibai Village didn't want to see it, he had no choice but to see it clearly. Oh, much to Xiao Hua's surprise, the venerable Wu of Shibai Village made a strange sound from his throat. His narrowed eyes slightly raised, and 2 balls of ghostly green light flashed out from the venerable Wu's eyes. Suddenly, Xiao Hua felt his entire body was covered by a kind of ice. An incomparably heavy and extreme coldness came from his skin and from the bottom of his heart at the same time. Hiss! Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. The protective golden light around his body immediately flourished, wanting to disperse the coldness. However, after the protective golden light appeared, the coldness on the surface of Xiao Hua's body seemed to be covered, and there was some faint warmth. However, the coldness in his heart became even more intense, as if it was about to freeze his blood vessels. Damn it, the venerable Wu of Shibai Village indeed lives up to his reputation. Xiao Hua bitterly smiled. Xiao Mao, this guy is a bit troublesome. After bitterly smiling, Xiao Hua simply didn't resist, and just stood there quietly. The venerable Wu of Shibai Village also seemed to be startled. He didn't expect that Xiao Hua would give up resisting when he tried just now. If it was someone else, perhaps they would have let go. After all, Xiao Hua was a junior, and this was the ancestral shrine of the Huta village. Unfortunately, the venerable Wu of Shibai Village was only startled for a moment, and then a trace of a cold smile hung on the corner of his mouth. An indescribable heartbeat sound came from Xiao Hua's ears. Thump, thump, thump. This heartbeat sound was extremely slow, as if there was a strange suction force. Xiao Hua felt this sound become increasingly louder, surrounding his entire body, and his own heartbeat also slowed along with this sound. The power of blood vessels. Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. This old bastard. The instant Xiao Hua came to a realization, thump, 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 the sound in his heart suddenly sped up, and Xiao Hua suddenly felt his entire body throbbing. Moreover, at the end of his blood vessels, his entire heart seemed to be about to burst. This is bad. Xiao Hua hurriedly circulated his magic power, and just as he was about to do his best to resist, he heard a faint voice say, "Jimin, this is just a junior cultivator of the Dao sect. Why are you willing to give up your face and make things difficult for him? Immediately, a faint, dark green brilliance flashed around Xiaohua's body, and all the coldness and sound disappeared, returning to the previous silence. Humph! This old man naturally doesn't want to make things difficult for a junior, but there are some juniors who overestimate themselves and want to make things difficult for this old man. Jinji, don't you think this old man should let them know that the people of Ming Mountain aren't easy to bully and fool? The venerable Wu of Shi Bai village raised his eyes, looked at the venerable Wu of Huta village who appeared on the stairs, and coldly snorted and said, "The matters of the juniors will naturally be settled by the juniors. I'm already old, so why should I care so much?" The venerable Wu of Huta village answered indifferently, and then glanced at Xiaohua and changed the topic, saying in an extremely serious tone, "Furthermore, this young friend Xiao is a distinguished guest of our Huta village, not to mention our Huta village, even if it's within the borders of Ming Mountain. If anyone dares to make things difficult for young friend Xiao, it's the same as going against our Huta village." Oh? The venerable Wu of Shi Bai village frowned and coldly said, "Jinji, are you going against our Shi Bai village? You know very well the matters of your Shi Bai village. This old man is too lazy to ask." The venerable Wu of Huta village waved his hand and said, "This young friend Xiao has nothing to do with your Shi Bai village. If anyone dares to touch him, even the shaman king won't allow it." Ah! The venerable Wu of Shi Bai village was startled and opened his eyes. His cold gaze swept over Xiao Hua's body, and he looked very shocked. "Jimin, why aren't you coming in? Other than Tanja and you, everyone else has already arrived. This is the grand meeting of the Huta village, and you're the closest one, yet you're the last one to arrive?" While they were talking, a tall old man appeared next to the venerable Wu of Huta village and shouted loudly. The venerable Wu of Shi Bai village glanced at him, then coldly looked at Xiaohua and quickly walked up the stairs. Caw! A beast's roar resounded through the sky from afar, and then the back mountain of Huta village, which was already cold, was suddenly filled with a fierce wind. A dark shadow, like a shooting star, rushed over from afar, and in just a blink of an eye, it flew above everyone's head. -11. Chapter 29:39. Hiss, how can its flying speed be so fast? Seeing that the black shadow's speed had far surpassed his own, Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed as he was shocked. When the black shadow landed on the steps of the ancestral temple, Xiao Hua could clearly see that the black shadow was a bird beast with 4 wings on its back. Not only did this bird beast have 4 wings, but it also had 3 claws under its abdomen and chest. On top of its head, there was a phoenix coronet. Damn it, I'm late again. Without waiting for this strange bird beast to stop, an old man who was as thin as a bamboo pole jumped down from the back of the bird beast. His body swayed slightly, and in the fierce wind, he flashed to the side of Huta village's elder Wu. "You're Dijiang village's elder Wu, so you're naturally good at speed. Even if you're late, can't you just fly a little faster?" The tall old man mocked. "So, you're always late. Minghua, I have something to do this time." Dijiang village's elder Wu argued. "My Ming Mountain is in such a dangerous situation today. Of course I have to rack my brains to think of a way." Minghua? Although these few elders were speaking in the language of Ming Mountain, Xiaohua could not understand them. However, when this elder Wu uttered the words Minghua, it sounded very similar to the name Qieshio when Xiaohua heard it. Xiaohua could not help but shudder in his heart. Could it be this old man is the Minghua that the 10,000 Demon Realms Empress is looking for? Xiaohua looked at the tall elder Wu on the steps in the distance, and the white-haired elder Wu's appearance. No matter how hard he tried, he could not put him together with the Empress's peerless appearance. It was like the feeling of cow dung and fresh flowers. Then, several people said a few more words and entered the ancestral temple. When the figures of several people disappeared, everyone on the steps let out a long breath and slowly moved. When Xiaohua followed the palace guard into the ancestral temple, he saw Li Zongbao, Fairy Hongxia, and the others standing in a corner not far from the door. Xiaohua did not need the palace guard to lead him and walked over. But just as Xiaohua took 2 steps, the palace guard behind him anxiously said, "Young Master Xiao, your position is not here." "Oh?" Where is it? Xiaohua turned around and asked curiously. The palace guard glanced at the skeleton with his sole consciousness and pointed to the top of the ancestral hall. He smiled apologetically and said, Young Master Zhao's position is just above the 11 Grand Shaman Elders. No need, I'll just stay here. Xiaohua looked at the Taoist robe on his body and shook his head. At this moment, he finally understood why so many soul warriors had been staring at him. This lowly one does not dare to disobey Elder Wu's orders. Young Master Xiao, please proceed. How could the palace guard let him do as he pleased? Go and tell Elder Wu. Xiaohua said indifferently, Since I have the qualifications to stand there, I can naturally stand here as well. Seeing that Xiaohua wasn't going, the palace guard could only leave and report to Elder Wu. Xiaohua ignored him and walked towards Fairy Hongxia and the others. Big brother. Without waiting for Xiaohua to approach, Xiao Mao waved his hand with a smile. What took you so long? Fairy Hongxia grumbled. We've been waiting for so long and thought that something had happened to you. Sigh, from what the guard said, we've only just arrived. Xiaohua sighed, however. I just met G-Man outside the palace. Oh? What for? Fairy Hongxia's face tightened as she hurriedly asked. Nothing. Nothing. Xiaohua knew that everyone was like him and had some preconceived ideas about G-Man. He waved his hand and said, She only asked about Ziyin and Ziming. She didn't make things difficult for me. Furthermore, this G-Man is really pitiful. Unfortunately, before he could finish, Fairy Hongxia said coldly, A pitiful person must have a hateful side. Xiaohua was speechless. What? Am I wrong? If not for her indulgence towards Ziyin, if not for her rejection of Ziming, would Empress Earth's stronghold have fallen to such a state? Fairy Hongxia retorted, Don't look at how she cares for Ziming on the surface and gives in to him in everything. She's actually retreating in order to advance. Once she catches hold of Ziming's weakness like before, she'll definitely kill Ziming. All right, just pretend I didn't say anything. Xiaohua was speechless. After all, everyone had their own judgment. He only hoped that his judgment wasn't too outrageous. Ignoring Fairy Hongxia's reproach, Xiaohua looked at the entire ancestral hall. Today was different from the last time. There weren't many people in the ancestral hall today, but they were all rather old. Most of them were Wu Lao. Furthermore, these Wu Lao were divided into 3 groups, clearly separated. The first group was the Wu Lao from the 12 main strongholds. They stood in front of the statue of Empress Earth Great God, occupying a large area. Behind them was the second group, close to 200 people. These 200 people were divided into 2 groups, standing on the left and right sides of the statue. They should be the Wu Lao from the 99 upper strongholds of Empress Earth Stronghold and Shibai Stronghold. Lastly was the third group. They were also divided into 2 groups, following behind the 99 upper strongholds. Each group had about 300 people. They should be the Wu Lao from the 360 lower strongholds. Xiaohua looked around. There were many Wu Lao here, and they all looked similar. He really couldn't differentiate the Wu Lao from the Bai and stronghold that he first met. Ziming doesn't seem to be in the ancestral hall? Xiaohua looked around for a moment, then suddenly realized something. Sure enough, the surroundings of the statue were empty, and there wasn't any trace of people. No, G-Man isn't here either? She should have come a long time ago. Ziming is the main character of tonight's lantern burning ceremony, and G-Man is second only to the Wu Lao in Empress Earth Village. How could she not be here? As he thought about this, Xiaohua focused his gaze on the left side of the statue, trying to find some clues. However, what he saw was still empty. Now, above the ancestral hall, the Wu Lao from the 12 main strongholds of Ming Mountain were gathered. Any one of them was an existence that Xiaohua looked up to. How could Xiaohua dare to release his Buddha's consciousness? After looking around, Xiaohua gave up and turned his gaze to the 12 Wu Lao who were whispering to each other. Among the 12 Wu Lao, other than the Wu Lao from Empress Earth Village who looked young, there were 3 others who were also abnormally young. However, these 3 people were facing Xiaohua from the side, so Xiaohua couldn't see their faces. In particular, the Wu Lao from Shiming Village that Xiaohua saw outside the ancestral hall seemed to have the name Ming Hua. His body was really big, and he was standing at the outermost area, blocking the other Wu Lao. Even if Xiao Hua wanted to see the faces of these Wu Lao, he couldn't. However, occasionally, from the side of Wu Lao's body, Xiao Hua could still see the back or side of those Wu Lao. They all seemed to look a little strange. There was even a Wu Lao who had a third arm growing out from his right arm. TSK. It's really a strange phenomenon. Xiao Hua blinked. Just as he was about to withdraw his gaze, Wu Lao, Ming Hua, raised his arm and moved away from the Wu Lao who had 3 arms. Coincidentally, the cloth that the Wu Lao was wearing on his head was suddenly lifted up. Under the cloth, a ferocious ghost face was revealed. His eyes, which looked like bloody holes, met Xiao Hua's gaze. Hiss! Xiao Hua was shocked, and all the hair on his body stood up. If he saw the ghost face on a normal day, he might not be afraid. However, the sudden appearance of the ghost face behind the Wu Lao's head and under the cloth was completely out of his expectations. Fortunately, the cloth seemed to have been brought up by the mysterious Netherfort's Elder Wu when he swayed. As the mysterious Netherfort's Elder Wu lowered his arm, the cloth fell again and covered the ghost face behind the Elder Wu's head. Furthermore, the mysterious Netherfort's Elder Wu's figure completely covered the Elder Wu. Damn it! Who are these Wu Lao of Ming Mountains? Xiao Hua thought to himself with lingering fear. What do these so-called 12 great gods look like? Could they all be? Thinking up to here, Xiao Hua suddenly had a kind of enlightenment. I understand now. These 12 great gods, could they be related to the ancient spirit beasts? These people in Ming Mountains are the descendants of those spirit beasts, just like how there are many cultivators with spirit beasts bloodlines in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. Furthermore, doesn't Fairy Hong Xia have the bloodline of the Ice Phoenix? Isn't the ancestral shrine of the Kai clan also in Ming Mountains? However, these 12 spirit beasts are too powerful. Oh, not necessarily. They are probably similar to Fairy Hong Xia's ancestor, the Ice Phoenix. Otherwise, the ancestral shrine of the Kai clan wouldn't be in Ming Mountains. Perhaps the Kai clan couldn't establish themselves in Ming Mountains, so they moved from Ming Mountains to my Dao sect's country of Xi. Hee, what a pity. If the Kai clan was also in Ming Mountains, I would also be able to become a Fu Man. Thinking of Fu Man, Xiao Hua's heart was moved. Where did Yu go? Doesn't he want to kill Xiao Mao? Now that Xiao Mao's identity is still unknown, it's the best opportunity for him to strike. Once Xiao Mao's identity is recognized by the shaman of Shi Bai village, what chance would he have? That's not right. I'm afraid Yu has already said something to the shaman of Shi Bai village. Xiao Hua frowned again. Otherwise, why would the shaman have a problem with me before entering the ancestral shrine? Why would he block so many people in front of the ancestral shrine of Ho-Tu village and attack me? Was he going to attack yours truly? Or will he attack Xiao Mao? The more Xiao Hua thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Looking at Xiao Mao's face, which was filled with excitement and expectation, he couldn't help but feel worried. While Xiao Hua's thoughts were running wild, another hour of waiting had passed. The entire ancestral shrine was noisy. Not only were the 12 great shaman talking, but many other shaman were also whispering to each other. This Dipankara ceremony was indeed rare. Suddenly, a thunderous sound came from outside the ancestral hall. The hall, which was originally quiet and noisy, immediately quieted down. Even the 12 great shaman who had gathered together to discuss hurriedly dispersed and stood in their respective positions. -11. Chapter 2940. Elder Wu of Ho-Tu village turned around and floated up into the sky. He gave the crowd a glance and said, Elders of Ho-Tu village, welcome to Ho-Tu village. Welcome to the rare Dipankara ceremony of Ho-Tu village. As you all know, Ho-Tu village hasn't held a Dipankara ceremony for several tens of thousands of years. If we follow the teachings of our ancestors, none of the G-Man of Ho-Tu village can be called G-Man. Ming Mountains is the sacred mountain of the 12 great gods, and also the place where the descendants of our great gods live and reproduce. For thousands of years, countless storms have washed over Ming Mountains, but we have always stood on the peak of Ming Mountains and never backed down. In order to continue the bloodline of the 12 great gods, it is unavoidable for us to be at death's door, unavoidable for us to panic and unavoidable for us to lose our confidence. However, we are after all the descendants of the great gods, and we are not the same as mortals. The great gods have always entrusted us with their hands. Although there is no Dipankara ceremony, the Dipankara ceremony has always existed in our hearts. Although G-Man of Huta village is not the rightful G-Man, in the hands of the great gods, she is still the rightful G-Man. And now, under the order of the great god Hutu, the soul falling lamp of Huta village has been repaired. From now on, when the G-Man is confirmed, we can hold the Dipankara ceremony again. G-Man of Huta village can now carry out the order of the great god Hutu. As Elder Wu's voice echoed out, the entire ancestral hall was boiling with excitement. Not only were the elders of Huta village chanting in some unknown language, even the elders of Huta village had gone crazy, as each of them was chanting the grace of the 12 great gods. Looking at the boiling scene, the young Elder Wu of Huta village descended from the sky and began chanting in some unknown language, while his body began dancing slowly. The 11 elders of Hutu village, standing behind Elder Wu, dared not to be negligent. Their faces were filled with solemnity and longing, while they were chanting the same language, and their bodies were dancing together with the movements of Elder Wu of Huta village. When the 12 elders of Huta village moved, the other elders of Huta village dared not to wait any longer. Their cheering stopped immediately. They began chanting in the same language. The entire ancestral hall was filled with an extremely solemn and pious voice. Strands of dark green light, mixed with strands of golden light, began to gather around the statue of the deity. There were even some dark green lights coming from the outside of the ancestral hall. Clearly, all of the soul warriors and natives of the Back Earth Palace were worshipping the deity statue at the same time. Not only that, but there were also some dark green lights coming from outside the ancestral hall. Clearly, all of the soul warriors and natives of the Back Earth Palace were worshipping the deity statue. At first, the light was like a small stream, but after the meal, it was like a tidal wave, filling the entire ancestral hall and covering the statue of the god. His power of faith? Xiao Hua saw the green brilliance and the faint golden threads and couldn't help but guess. Xiao Hua and the others couldn't hear what the old shaman of the Huta village said earlier in the shaman language. Xiao Hua wanted Xiao Mao to explain, but when he saw that Xiao Mao had the same longing expression as the other old shamans, Xiao Hua swallowed his words. However, even though Xiao Hua didn't understand what the old shaman of the Huta village was saying, he could roughly guess from the old shaman's expression and the reactions of the surrounding elders of Huta village. As time passed, the brilliance became even more numerous, as if it was real. However, the golden threads in the brilliance became fewer and fewer, almost invisible. Gugajiji. Suddenly, the old shaman of the Huta village let out a hysterical roar and jumped up from the ground. Then, the sound from his mouth changed greatly, becoming extremely loud and resounding. His body danced crazily in the air. However, the shaman language of praise in the entire hall still maintained the same rhythm as before, neither fast nor slow. As the old shaman of the Hutu village danced, a layer of blood-red light appeared around his body. This blood-red light floated from the surface of his body, just like the true blood dharma body of a disciple of a cultivation family. It gradually condensed into the image of the Hutu god in the air. This dharma body was so clear that it was as if the hair on the great god's body could be seen. Moreover, a majestic and supreme aura gradually emerged from the dharma body. Eoo! The dharma body suddenly swung its snake tail and let out a roar that caused the hearts of others to tremble. At the place where this roar fell, a deep sound was immediately produced. In front of the statue of the Huta god, more than 10 jade skeletons appeared. In the middle of these skeletons, Ziming and G-Man, who were dressed in splendid attire, also appeared. At this time, Ziming was kneeling on the ground with his hands held in front of his eyes in an extremely sincere manner. His hands were like blooming lilies as he held the soulfall lamp. G-Man from the Huta village didn't kneel. Instead, she stood to the side with her waist slightly bent. However, her hands were also holding a small bone staff in her right hand. Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao, and Red Dawn Fairy stood at the back with a trace of surprise on their faces as they looked at everything in front of them. In the ancestral shrine, everyone was dancing. Many of these elders had dark skin, and their clothes were also strange. If they were to be described as a group of demons dancing, it wouldn't be more appropriate. Looking at Xiao Mao, he seemed to be dancing on his own without anyone teaching him. Moreover, there was also a faint green light coming out from between his eyebrows and converging into the current in the ancestral shrine. Caw, 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 caw. The Hutu village's elder Wu suddenly stopped flying, and the sound from his mouth grew louder. The Dharmakaya slowly flew toward the statue, along with the seemingly solid green stream. Seeing the two extremely similar figures approaching, the Hutu village's elder Wu's body fell to the ground like a meteor, and he prostrated himself deeply in front of the statue. At the same time, all the other elders stopped dancing and prostrated themselves on the ground at the same time. Boom! A faint roar sounded, and the Hutu village elder rushed into the statue of the Hutu great god. The statue of the deity instantly emitted an extremely resplendent green light. Moreover, the 7 hands behind the statue emitted a faint black aura. As soon as the green light and black gas appeared, the green light in the ancestral shrine mixed with faint golden threads rushed into the statue like a swarm of bees. The entire statue let out a strange sound. This sound was almost exactly the same as the Hutu village elder's chanting of the Hutu village elder. Woo-woo-woo. When the green light in the ancestral shrine completely disappeared, a shrill ghost-like wail was clearly emitted from the god statue. A feeling comparable to a huge boulder pressing down on one's head instantly spread out from the god statue. Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao, and Fairy Hong Xia, who had been standing quietly and watching everything in the ancestral shrine, had no strength to resist at all in the face of this heavy pressure. They were immediately overturned and pressed down on the ground. Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. The golden light around his body flashed chaotically. Unfortunately, whether it was his magic power or strength, it couldn't be compared to this seemingly unparalleled heavy pressure. Looking at the statue again, the Hutu village elder's Dharma body was also squeezed out and returned to the elder's body in an extremely sorry state. Furthermore, as Elder Wu's celestial body appeared, a cold, barbaric, and merciless aura appeared from the deity statue. The moment this aura was released, it immediately filled the entire ancestral hall. Moreover, it was as vast as the sea of smoke as it enveloped the entire Hutu stockade. Oh, the strange thing was that Ziming and G-Man were pressed down by the heavy pressure. The soul-falling lamp in Ziming's hand flew up, and a terrifying aura rushed out from the soul-falling lamp. The 3-headed black hound in the spirit treasure immediately appeared and even opened its mouth to roar. Ji. Just as Xiao Hua raised his head with difficulty, the statue that was originally an inanimate object suddenly let out a cryptic, hard-to-understand and rare syllable. It seemed to be green seal script, but also seemed to not be green seal script. Following this syllable, the 3-headed black hound's body immediately emitted an intense green light. A kind of heart-trembling fluctuation came from the soul-falling lamp. Pooh! It was also at this time that Ziming, who was lying on the ground, opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. It really landed in midair. The blood essence instantly turned into a phantom image of the Hutu great god. When the 3-headed black hound saw this phantom image, it roared again. One of the beast heads opened slightly, and the phantom image entered it like a stream of light. Swoosh! Following the entrance of the phantom image, countless ghost wails and wolf howls came out from the void all around. Furthermore, countless of light and shadow rushed into the ancestral shrine from all directions. All of the flames in the entire Hutu stronghold disappeared at this moment. Suddenly, a jade-colored flame was born from the 3-headed black hound's head. Once the flame was born, it immediately lit up the entire ancestral shrine. Xiao Hua could not help but close his eyes. Even so, the jade-green flame still penetrated Xiao Hua's mind, and even his soul. Waves of shock pulsed along with the flickering of the flames. It was as if the flames could see through the entire world, illuminating everyone's soul. See, Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. This spirit treasure, isn't it too powerful? Just as this thought appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, the flame immediately retracted. Furthermore, The phantom image of the three-headed black hound also entered the fallen soul lamp. The entire ancestral shrine sunk into an indescribable darkness. Only the brilliance of the fallen soul lamp was reflected in everyone's eyes. Huff! Another sound like an old man gasping for breath came out from the darkness. Xiaohua suddenly felt his body become lighter. Furthermore, that frightening aura also disappeared like a torrent. Wah wah wah. EU. Just as Xiaohua was about to stand up, countless shaman language once again emerged from within the ancestral temple. Streaks of green light once again appeared within the ancestral temple. In front of Xiaohua, the hundreds and thousands of shaman elders once again began to dance with tears streaming down their faces. The atmosphere was even crazier than before. Xiaohua slowly stood up amidst this jubilation. His heart was extremely puzzled. His eyes also flashed with fear as he looked at the god statue in the middle of the green light. -11. Chapter 29:41. That aura. Does it belong to who, the great god? Why is it so vast? What is that pressure? Is it pressure? Is human strength like an ant in front of this pressure? If all of this belongs to Hu, the great god, then where is he? How did he come into this statue? In front of this aura, let alone a nascent soul cultivator, even a divinity separation cultivator or a body fusion cultivator. I'm afraid they are no match for it. If I want to fight against this aura, I have to cultivate more. Poor Xiaohua. He could only imagine a divinity separation cultivator. He didn't even know what a body fusion cultivator was. How could he compare the aura of this statue to a body fusion cultivator? Perhaps he would only know such a superficial thing after he cultivated to the body fusion level. In the ancestral shrine, whether it was the descendants of Hu, the great god, or the other 11 great gods, all of them were dancing with tears streaming down their faces. They had always been proud of the bloodline of the great gods. Although the Taoist cultivators looked down on them and thought that they were uncivilized barbarians, they knew very well that in terms of inheritance, they were not much worse than the Taoist cultivators. However, they had never thought about where the bloodline they were so proud of came from. Or perhaps they had thought about it before, but they had always relied on and revered this kind of power, and it was impossible for them to have a rebellious heart. It was also impossible for them to be as curious as Xiaohua and think so much, even thinking about how to resist this aura. It had to be said that sometimes success or failure didn't lie in cultivation or talent, but in the starting point, in the vision, in the dreams. As a human, whether it was a mortal, a cultivator, or a swordsman, as long as they had dreams, their lives would be romantic and they would never be lonely. After a full hour, the entire ancestral shrine calmed down again. The noisy and crazy aura still lingered in the ancestral shrine. Elders. The elder Wu of Hutu village stood in front of the crowd. His ruddy face was extremely pale. It was obvious that he was extremely weak. However, what didn't match his weakness was the ecstasy and excitement in his eyes. The elder Wu waved his hand and said loudly, "Hu, the great god, didn't forget his people. After tens of thousands of years, he still came to Ming Mountains under our devotion. He is like this, and so are the other 11 great gods. Therefore, we should firmly believe that no matter what happens in Ming Mountains, no matter what difficulties we encounter, we will be able to face them and overcome them with ease." Then, old Wu waved his hand, and the lost soul lamp that was floating in the air slowly fell into his hand. At this time, the lost soul lamp had returned to normal. It was almost exactly the same as when Xiaohua first saw it. The only difference was that the bean-like flame on the lost soul lamp was like an emerald gem, sparkling and translucent, and did not move at all. Hutu villages which elder, Jinji, under the oracle of Hutu god, I bestow this soul-falling lamp to the god's descendant, Ziming. Let her take charge of our Hutu village's soul treasure in preparation for the position of Ji-man. Although Xiaohua couldn't understand what he was saying, Xiaomao tactfully explained to Xiaohua and the others at the side. Boy obeys old Wu's order. Ziming drifted to Grandmaster Wu's side, knelt down on the ground, raised his hands high above his head and said respectfully, "With the soulfall lamp as my life, I will accompany it at all times, and I will comprehend the oracle of the great god Hutu. I will keep the stability of Hutu village and the safety of Ming Mountains in my heart." Old Wu's face revealed a kind smile, and he gently placed the lost soul lamp in Ziming's hand. Ziming slowly rose to his feet, his face filled with pride and pride. "Good." As Ziming held the lost soul lamp in his hand and walked to the side, Old Wu of Huta village said in a loud voice, "Fellow Old Wu, today is the burning lamp ceremony of our Huta village, and in this grand occasion, I have an important announcement to make. Elder Wu." Just as everyone was slightly stunned and waiting for Elder Wu to reveal the truth, G-Man from the Hutu stronghold took a step forward and said with a smile, "I also have a small piece of news that I would like to announce. I hope Elder Wu can forgive me for being rash." "Oh, what do you want?" Elder Wu furrowed his brows, clearly unhappy. However, G-Man didn't care. She glanced at Ziming and smiled. Ziming, who was holding the lost soul lamp in his hand, felt his heart tighten, and an unnatural expression appeared on his face. He didn't know what G-Man was going to do. "Fellow Old Wu," G-Man of Huta village said in a clear voice, "today is the ceremony of our Huta village, and also Ziming's day. As G-Man of Huta village, I am happy for her from the bottom of my heart. Everyone knows that when the previous G-Man returned to the great god's embrace, Ziming was a baby boy and couldn't take over the position of G-Man. It was me who took over the position for her. Now, Ziming finally lit the lost soul lamp and completed the test of the Hutu great god. She is the real G-Man. Just now, when Huta god descended, I suddenly understood that I was just sent by Huta god to lead the way for Ziming." Ah! Not only was Elder Wu surprised, even Ziming turned pale with fright. They had never imagined that G-Man would actually say something like that. Especially Xiao Hua. After Xiao Mao's explanation, he was also stunned. How is this possible? But it's just a rejuvenation pill. This G-Man, how could she give the position of G-Man to Ziming? Even if the rejuvenation pill is important, but if it doesn't exist today or tomorrow, who knows if it will exist in the future? As G-Man, to obtain the rejuvenation pill, wouldn't it be harder than ascending to the heavens? This was truly a little strange. Could it be that the missing rejuvenation pill? G-Man? Old Wu whispered, "This matter, G-Man." Ziming was also used to modestly declining. Boy is still young, not enough to intimidate everyone, not enough to sit on the position of G-Man. "Old Wu, when Huta great god descended just now, I was already enlightened. Forgive me for being a little willful, but I have already decided, 10 years later, I will give the position of G-Man to Ziming." G-Man said seriously, "I will tell all the Old Wu about this at Ziming's lantern ceremony. Please be my witness." 10 years? Old Wu pondered for a moment. Looking at G-Man's expression, she didn't seem to be faking it. So he nodded slightly and said to the 11 Old Wu of the shaman villages, "Everyone, although this is an internal matter of my Huta village, since everyone is here, how about you be my witness?" "Good." The tall Old Wu of Shiming village clapped his hands and praised. "Although our 12 shaman villages have always valued bloodline above all, we are all descendants of great gods. It's inevitable that there will be some conflicts and grudges when fighting for the position of Old Wu, and G-Man's actions make me feel gratified. I will be your witness." Immediately, several people clapped their hands and cheered. Ziming would still hesitate if he were to hand over G-Man's position to him now. After all, he wasn't able to convince the masses, and it would be difficult for him to take over the position. Who knew? G-Man might even do something to him. But when he heard that G-Man would give the position of G-Man 10 years later, it was giving him time to grow his wings. Only now did Ziming know that G-Man truly wanted to return the position of G-Man to him. "G-Man," Ziming called out softly. That feeling was like when she brought Xiaohua to Huai Xian Pavilion that day. That voice was like Ziming's childish voice calling out, "Boy." As he spoke, Ziming choked a little and didn't know how to continue. G-Man also smiled and nodded lightly. A ball of warmth appeared in her heart. This was a feeling she hadn't felt since Ziyan's death. Perhaps it's true? Xiaohua couldn't be sure if G-Man's abdication was related to the rejuvenation pill. When Old Wu saw G-Man give the position of G-Man to Ziming in front of so many people, he was also overjoyed. He understood the conflict between Ziming and G-Man better than Xiao Hua. As the saying goes, if the family is harmonious, everything will prosper. With the conflict between Ziming and G-Man, how could the Huta village be stable? Even if Ziming couldn't directly go against G-Man, he couldn't resist the temptation of some small fries. Or, even if Ziming and G-Man weren't enemies, it was obvious that many people wanted to choose their own direction. Would they follow Ziming? Or would they follow G-Man? This could easily form many undercurrents in the Huta village. It could be said that Ziyan's death, the invasion of the demon dwellers, was also related to this conflict. Although the two of them hadn't completely reconciled, G-Man's concession had made this conflict gradually fade and disappear. It was believed that the Hutu village 10 years later would be completely different from the Hutu village today. Good. Old Wu raised his eyebrows and said, "This old man thought that today was my Huta village's double happiness. But I didn't expect it to be 3. I really have to thank Huta great God." "Old man Jianji, what's your third happiness? Hurry up and tell me." A vulgar voice shouted. "Could it be that you have another little Old Wu?" Hee. Old Wu of Huta village wasn't angry. He laughed and said, "This is the third happiness? It's the biggest happiness today. Not only is it a happiness for my Huta village, but it's also a happiness for my Ming Mountain." "Oh?" Old Wu of Shiming village suddenly realized something and said anxiously, "Jianji, are you talking about the Shaman King?" "Ha ha ha, that's right, that's right." Old Wu of Huta village laughed and said, "The Shaman King summoned us and dismissed us without waiting for the result of the discussion. If it weren't for this great happiness for my Huta village, wouldn't his God-connecting technique be useless?" Hurry. Old Wu of Shiming village was anxious. "Jianji, hurry up and tell us the reason. I've invited great God Xinming for this matter, but I didn't expect that the root of this problem is with great God Hutu." "Everyone, please wait." Old Wu nodded with a smile and said to Ziming, "Ziming, tell the seniors about the millet seed." -11. Chapter 29:42. Yes, this boy knows. Ziming gracefully rose to his feet and put away the lamp of lost soul. Then, he reached his hand into his bosom and took out a storage bag. After opening it, he took out a handful of millet seeds and said, "Dear Magi, please know that these are the millet seeds sent by the great deity Hutu from the QC. They are completely different from the millet seeds we have in Ming Mountains. Not only are they not afraid of drought, they also grow very fast and can be harvested many times a year." "How is that possible?" The elder of Shiming village waved his hand and a few millet seeds fell into his hand. After taking a closer look, he still couldn't believe it and said, "These are just ordinary millet seeds. I can recognize them clearly. I've even studied them carefully for the sake of millet seeds." "Please wait a moment, Elder Wu," Ziming said with a smile. "The effect of these millet seeds has been tested by Kueha village, a subordinate of Shi Bai village. I'd like to ask Elder Wu to explain it to you." As he was speaking, the Elder Wu of Kueha village walked out from the crowd in a panic. He was only one of the 360 senior magi in the Shi Bai village and had an extremely low social status. Normally, he didn't even have the chance to meet the senior magi of the Shi Bai village, not to mention meeting the senior magi of the 12 main villages. "Greetings, Grand Elder Wu. I'm Kiji." The Elder Wu of Shi Bai village, who didn't even mention his name when he met Xiao Mao, finally announced his name and bowed to the 12 Grand Elder Wu. "You little kid, why are you so polite? Tell me, are these millet seeds as Ziming said?" The Elder Wu of Shiming village waved his hand impatiently. "Yes, Grand Elder Wu." The Elder Wu of Bai Yin village said hastily, "I've planted them twice, and each time, I've harvested a lot of millet seeds. Not only is the harvest 30% more than the previous one, the harvested millet seeds can also withstand drought and ripen early." Ha ha ha. Seeing that someone had already tried it, the other 10 Grand Elder Wu's faces were filled with wild joy. Only the Elder Wu of Shi Bai village had a gloomy expression. Ziming, is this a storage bag?" The Elder Wu, who had 3 arms and a face hidden behind a square cloth, was stunned when he saw the storage bag in Ziming's hand. "That's right, Grand Magus Elder. Ziming said with a smile. How can the people of Ming Mountains travel to QC so easily? It was sent here by the Tao sect cultivators under the guidance of the Hutu great god. A Tao sect cultivator? Everyone in the ancestral shrine focused their gazes on Xiao Hua's group. At this moment, they also understood why there were several Tao sect cultivators in the ancestral shrine of the Empress Earth Stockade. Young Master Xiao, please come over. Ziming's clear voice rang out. Following Xiao Mao's analysis, Xiao Hua saw that everyone was looking at him, and Ziming had called out to him. Xiao Hua knew that it was time for him and the others to go on stage. Therefore, Xiao Hua nodded at Xiao Mao, and under Xiao Mao's lead, they walked out of the crowd of shamans and came to the front of the statue of Huda God. Taiyin Village's Elder Wu was also in front. When he saw Xiao Mao walk past him, his face flushed red. He wanted to open his mouth to call out, but he didn't dare. How could Xiao Mao not know what he was thinking? He only nodded slightly at him with a smile on his lips. This smile immediately put Taiyin Village's Elder Wu at ease. Junior Xiao Hua of the country of Xi's Imperial Thunder Sect greets all the seniors. Xiao Hua was the first to bow, and Xiao Mao and the others followed suit. Many of the shamans nodded slightly and didn't pay much attention to him. However, Shiming Village's Elder Wu asked in the language of the Tao sect in disbelief, "You found this grain?" This one and this one's junior brother, Xiao Mao, found it together. Xiao Hua corrected. "Where did you find it?" "QC, of course." Xiao Hua said with a smile. "It's just that it's a barren island. Junior brother and I encountered a storm. If we were to find it again now, I'm afraid it won't be easy." "Why did you come to Ming Mountains?" "Junior is here to gain experience." Xiao Hua was still neither haughty nor humble, but I didn't expect. Under the arrangement of Huta Great God, I'm here to deliver the grain seed to the people of Ming Mountains. Genji, you're here to deliver the grain seed on behalf of Huta Great God, so you're Huta Great God's messenger. Shebi Village's Elder Wu said coldly. But when will this Tao sect cultivator become the messenger of Ming Mountain's great god? Jamin, Huta Village's Elder Wu's expression changed, which was rare for him, and he said faintly, "I only said that Xiao Hua is here to deliver the grain seed, but I never said he's the messenger of Huta Great God. The grain seed is far away in the QC, and the people of Ming Mountains rarely go there. That's why Huta Great God sent a Tao sect cultivator here. What's wrong with that? Besides, even if Huta Great God sent Xiao Hua as her messenger, I won't doubt it." "Oh." Before Shebi Village's Elder Wu could speak, another young shaman asked curiously, "What do you mean?" "You must know about the sacred beast that descended from the sky a few dozen years ago, right?" Hutu Village's Elder Wu said faintly, "Oh, that's right. Where's the sacred beast of your Huta village?" Only now did many shaman elders remember, and they all looked at the table in front of Hutu Great God's statue. "That sacred beast is Xiao Hua's soul beast." Huta Village's Elder Wu said, "Xiao Hua came here to train himself in order to find his soul beast. Tell me, if Huta Great God didn't send him here, why did his soul beast come to Ming Mountain's Huta Village before him?" Hearing Elder Wu's words, Xiao Hua also took out Blackie. Blackie was obediently lying in his hand, and its eyes were hazy with sleep. Hiss! Many grand shaman elders of shaman villages gasped. They had seen Blackie before, and they knew that it was not an ordinary soul beast. But this strange creature was actually in Xiao Hua's hand, and it was so intimate with him. Even if Xiao Hua was the messenger of Huta Great God, who could refute that? A thoughtful look appeared in the eyes of several shaman elders. Of course, Xiao Hua is a cultivator of Taoist sect, and he has never said that he is the messenger of Huta Great God. He came here only to take away his soul beast and leave behind the seed that Huta Great God entrusted to him to help the people of Ming Mountains get through this crisis. That is all. Hutu Village's Elder Wu looked at the crowd and added, "Do we not need to pay any price?" Hutu Village's Elder Wu asked. Xiao Hua smiled. Without waiting for Hutu Village's Elder Wu to answer, he said, "There is no need to pay any price. This seed is given to the people of Ming Mountains by Huta Great God, and it is not ours. Why should we pay any price?" "All right." Huta Village's Elder Wu nodded, then turned to Huta Village's Elder Wu and said, "Jianji, since Xiaohua has said so, this old man will not be polite. But there are so few seeds, I'm afraid it will not be easy to distribute them. You don't need to worry about that, Huda Village's elder Wu said with a smile. Since he is sent by Huda Great God, how could he not consider it thoroughly? Hee. Ziming also laughed. He extended his hand and took out 5 more storage bags from his bosom. So many? Hutu Village's elder Wu's eyes flashed with joy. I have more here. Hutu Village's G-man also walked over and took out 6 more storage bags. Huda Village's elder Wu said with a smile, Huda Great God sent us 12 storage bags, and each of our 12 main villages will get one. Although there are other shaman villages in Wu Ming that do not have one, our 12 main villages will distribute these seeds first. After a year and a half, we will distribute them in Wu Ming. All right. All the shamans were overjoyed, and their gazes fell on the storage bags. The shamans of Huta Village and Shebi Village are all here. After a while, we will distribute them carefully. The other shamans can take a storage bag and distribute them yourselves, G-man said with a smile on the side. Hearing this, the shamans did not stand on ceremony. They each took a storage bag and opened it to take a look. Their eyes were filled with satisfaction. After all, Xiaohua had left a lot of seeds in these storage bags. Although they could not solve all the disasters in Ming Mountains in one go, it would not be a problem for 5 to 6 years. In the eyes of these great shaman elders, 5 to 6 years was just a blink of an eye. Jianji, thank you so much. A shaman elder with a blue face said, the people of Rushu Village will remember the kindness of Huta Village. Don't be so polite. Huta Village's elder Wu said with a smile, we are all descendants of the 12 great gods. We should support each other. If you really want to thank, you can thank these 2 little friends from Dao sect. They came from Ming Mountains and suffered a lot in sword domain. Xiaohua wanted to put on a smile and humbly decline. Unfortunately, after the shaman elder glanced at him and Xiao Mao, he only nodded slightly. Although there was no arrogance on his face and no disdain in his eyes, it was obvious that they were nothing in the eyes of these great shaman elders. If that's the case, I'll take my leave first. The shaman elder with a blue face moved his gaze away from Xiaohua and Xiao Mao, nodded at the Huta Village's elder Wu, and said lightly. A hint of helplessness appeared in the eyes of Hutu Village's elder Wu. He valued Xiaohua very much, but he couldn't ask the other shaman elders from the other 11 shaman villages to have the same opinion as him. Xiaohua's status might not be any worse than his, so he couldn't force him. All right. Huta Village's elder Wu nodded and said with a smile, Ming Mountains are now full of mourning. The earlier we leave, the earlier we can make plans. Wait. Right at this moment, Shebi Village's elder Wu opened his mouth and said with a strange expression, Jianji, some things are better said in front of all the shaman elders. Since they are all here, why don't you tell them about him? After saying that, Shebi Village's elder Wu looked at Xiao Mao and even pointed at him with his finger. Jamin, this is the business of your Shebi Village and Huda Village. It has nothing to do with us. The tall and burly Shiming Village's elder Wu smiled and said, you should solve it yourselves. In fact, when Ziming pointed out Hebi Village's elder Wu, all the great shaman elders had realized something. If Huta Village wanted to test these millet seeds, they would definitely choose the shaman villages under Hutu Village's command. It was impossible for them to look for the shaman villages under Shebi Village. Besides, Shebi Village's elder Wu had attacked Xiaohua before he even entered the ancestral temple of Huta Village. There must be something fishy about this. These shaman elders didn't want to get involved in the conflict between the 2 villages. -11. Chapter 29:43. Jamin, it's better for me to talk to you in private. Elder Wu from Huta Village didn't want to reveal Xiao Mao's incident to the public. After all, he wasn't sure what had happened in Shibai Village. We, the 12 shaman villages, have always shared weal and woe, and there's nothing that we can't talk about. Elder Wu from Shibai Village said indifferently, but you, Huta Village, are using a Dao sect cultivator to threaten me with this seed? I'd like to ask, Jianji, why is Huta Village so interested in the internal affairs of Shibai Village when even the Shaman King can't interfere with our internal affairs? Hee Jamin. So that's what you're thinking. Elder Wu from Huta Village sneered. I wanted to help you, but since you've misunderstood me, I have no choice but to be frank with you. Huda Village's elder Wu was depressed. Unlike Huta Village, Shibai Village didn't have as many descendants as Huda Village. The bloodline in the village was getting thinner day by day, and many factions had formed in the village. Although Elder Wu didn't care too much about it, he was still scratching his head. Especially this time, the drought in Ming Mountains was very serious, and because of it, various factions had taken action. Not only were the conflicts increasing, but the methods they used were also more severe. When Elder Wu from Shibai Village returned from the Shaman King's place, he immediately heard that something was wrong with Baili Village. To his surprise, someone with the purest bloodline of great god Shibai had appeared in Shibai Village, and this person was a Dao sect cultivator. When he heard that this person was with Ziming from Huta Village, Elder Wu was infuriated for no reason, thinking that Huta Village was trying to encroach on his Shibai Village. But today, he saw Elder Wu from Huta Village take out the seed that could save lives, and this seed, Elder Wu from Baili Village didn't report it to him in time. Obviously, he had been instructed by Elder Wu from Huta Village to launch an attack and threaten him with this seed. That was why he couldn't help but jump up in anger. Jinji, let these kids go first. Elder Wu from Baili Village glanced at them and said indifferently. His face had turned blue. All right. Elder Wu from Huta Village nodded. Then he turned and said, G-Man, Ziming, bring Huta Village and Huta Village to Huta Village's Huta Village and distribute the seed. In addition, let Changji tell them about the things they should pay attention to and how to sow the seeds. The grains of our Ming Mountains have always been nurtured by nature. They might not even know how to sow them. I know. G-Man nodded, then slowly walked out of the ancestral hall with the hundreds of senior magi. Where are these cultivators? A young magus asked. This is a matter of Ming Mountain. Although they don't understand magus language, they shouldn't stay here. Senior Marshal Brother Li and Senior Marshal Sister Hong Xia can leave, but my big brother can't leave. Facing the 11 elders, Xiao Mao felt weak in his heart and hurriedly argued. Oh? When the Shiming Village's Elder Wu heard Xiao Mao's sorcerer language, his eyes lit up. He looked at the Shebi Village's Elder Wu strangely, and the others also understood. Shibai Village's Elder Wu's face was terrifyingly dark. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Hutu Village's Elder Wu. It was clear that he had placed all the blame on Hutu Village's Elder Wu. After Fairy Hong Xia and Li Zongbao left, the entire ancestral hall fell into silence. No one said a word. Jinji, don't you want to explain something to me? Finally, Shebi Village's Elder Wu spoke. I don't want to explain anything. Huta Village's Elder Wu said calmly. Look at this young man's face and see if you have any impression of him. I've never seen him before. Shebi Village's Elder Wu answered firmly. What about someone who looks like him? Or his ancestor? Hutu Village's Elder Wu frowned. What are you trying to say? Jinji. Shebi Village's Elder Wu said coldly. Do you think he's a descendant of some senior magus of our Shebi Village? Shebi Village's Elder Wu emphasized the word, think. Poor Xiao Hua. He couldn't understand a single word. Xiao Mao's face was filled with fear, and he didn't dare to say anything else. Isn't he a descendant of your Shebi Village? Huta Village's Elder Wu was getting anxious. Didn't you hear his magus language? If he's not the descendant of great god Shebi, how could he speak so fluently? What I heard. Speaking up to hear, Elder Wu glanced at Xiao Mao and transmitted his voice to Shebi Village's Elder Wu. Although the 10 great magus elders were standing there, their gazes were either looking at the storage pouch or the statue of great god Hutu. It was as if their minds weren't here. Hearing Elder Wu's transmission, Shebi Village's Elder Wu's face turned red, and he retorted. Huta Village's Elder Wu laughed. Looks like I've made a mistake. I thought I was that person. However, if he's not that person, he must be related to your Shebi Village. There are many people related to my Shebi Village. Shebi Village's Elder Wu snorted coldly. But someone with such a pure bloodline. I'm afraid he's the only one, right? Huta Village's Elder Wu advised. Now your Shebi Village is really in a mess. Sword cultivators and cultivators are all acting like your own sword domain. What about the message I sent you last time? How is it? Is it true? Shebi village's elder Wu hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "It's true, and it's even spreading. I've killed over 20,000 people. I have to thank you for this." Over 20,000 people? Huda village's elder Wu was dumbfounded. "I didn't get that much information, did I? Oomph, they are all my people. I can kill as many as I want." Shebi village's elder Wu snorted coldly. "Didn't you kill 5,000 people too? It's the pot calling the kettle black." Hee hee. Huda village's elder Wu laughed. "If it didn't involve the foundation of my Huta village, how could I be so ruthless? Also, my fellow elders, their target is the people of Ming Mountains. I've told you this in my previous message. Don't be careless." Got it. The few senior Magi's eyes brightened up, and they agreed without pause. "That's enough, Jianji. This little kid from Dao sect has nothing to do with me." Shebi village's elder Wu seemed to hate Xiao Mao. He waved his hand and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll return to Shebi village now." "Don't be hasty." How could Huta village's elder Wu let him go so easily? He raised his head and said, "Xiao Mao, show him the portrait in the jade slip. Perhaps he can find something." "Yes." Xiao Mao bit his lips, then took out the jade slip he had hidden in his pocket and handed it over to Shebi village's elder Wu respectfully. Shebi village's elder Wu glanced at the jade slip on the ground indifferently. He grabbed it with his hand, but didn't take it. Xiao Mao looked at this unfriendly elder Wu, but he didn't take a step back. This jade slip was very important to him, and he had to take it back. Shebi village's elder Wu glanced at the jade slip, then casually returned it to Xiao Mao and said, "I'm sorry, Jianji. I've disappointed you. I don't know this woman." "That's strange." Huta village's elder Wu was really puzzled. If Shebi village's elder Wu didn't know her, how could she be from Shebi village? He turned to look at Xiao Mao and said, "Do you have any other keepsakes?" This. Xiao Mao naturally had the jade pendant his mother had left for him. But seeing Shebi village's elder Wu's attitude and Huta village's elder Wu's helpless expression, he didn't dare to take it out. This was the only thing his mother had left for him. He would rather not find out his identity than lose this jade pendant. He didn't want to make the same mistake as Jinghua City. "No." Xiao Mao refused decisively. "Sigh. Then there's no other way." Huta village's elder Wu sighed. It seems... Oh, wait a moment. Just as the Huda Stockade's elder Wu and Xiao Mao gave up, the Shibai Stockade's elder Wu seemed to have thought of something. He stretched out his hand and said, "Show me the jade slip again." "Yes?" Xiao Mao was overjoyed. He quickly took out the jade slip again and handed it over. This time, Shebi village's elder Wu looked at it for a long time. He frowned slightly. When he returned the jade slip to Xiao Mao, he said, "I have some impression of this girl. Xiao Mao felt his mouth go dry. He opened his mouth and looked at Shebi village's elder Wu. "Can I tell you who she is?" Shebi village's elder Wu rolled his eyes and said coldly, "But before that, you have to tell me, who asked you to come to Ming Mountains? What's your purpose in coming to Ming Mountains?" "No one asked me to come to Ming Mountains." Xiao Mao understood what Shebi village's elder Wu meant. He smiled and said, "Besides, I came to Ming Mountains to accompany Big Brother and the others to train. In fact, before I came to Ming Mountains and met Hebi village's elder Wu, I didn't even know I had the bloodline of Ming Mountains." "Humph." Shebi village's elder Wu harumphed coldly. How could he believe it? "Elder." Xiao Mao had no choice but to tell him about his impression of his parents and how he came to Ming Mountains with Xiao Hua and the others. "In the end," he said, "if it wasn't because you wanted to kill me, I still wouldn't know I have an enemy in Shebi village. Of course, I think Hebi village's elder Wu might have mistaken me for someone else." "Yiyu?" Shebi village's elder Wu frowned even more. "He is a sword cultivator, and he is our Shebi village's servant. What grudge does he have with you?" "I don't know," Xiao Mao answered honestly. "Until now, I'm still confused." "Hee. Jamin, can't you see through such a simple thing?" A young elder Wu with a red face sneered. "If I'm not mistaken, this kid's mother must be an unknown girl in your Shebi village. Even you didn't pay attention to her. And this kid's father should also be a swordsman. Although this kid doesn't know Yiyu, he looks exactly like his father. That's why Yiyu was able to recognize this kid's origin with just a glance." But why did you want to kill this kid? I'm afraid that this kid's father has some secret with you. -11. Chapter 29:44. Panju, why do you have to be so vague? A similarly young shaman with long cheeks said straightforwardly, from what this old man sees, this child's father must have the same goal as this night rain. He must have wanted to go to Shibai village to win the favor of G-Man and obtain the position of Fu-Man. Unfortunately, this child's father was a sentimental person. When he met this child's mother, for the sake of an unknown woman from Shibai village, he didn't even want the position of Fu-Man and directly eloped with this woman. Hee. The women of Ming Mountains are sentimental. Shibai village is close to the border of Ming Mountains, so it has a lot of contact with the swordsmen of Sword Region. This kind of thing is not unusual, right? Jimin, tell me, am I right? Jimin, am I right? The elder Wu of Ho-Tu village had a smile on his face. Obviously, he had also guessed it, so he asked. Yes, I can't remember the name of this girl. She seems to be a servant girl who served G-Man of Shibai village. The elder Wu of Shibai village didn't have a bad expression on his face. He said calmly, if I'm not mistaken, what Feng Min said should be correct. Hee. I can't believe it. Feng Min said with a smile. A lowly servant girl and the son of a swordsman from Sword Region actually have such a pure bloodline of a great god. The strangeness of this is really hard to understand. Jimin, this servant girl, and this swordsman. And that Yi, you have to investigate carefully. There might be some interesting stories behind this. A tall and thin old man who had been silent all this while said with a smile, I remember that there was a case of bloodline loss in your Shibai village. But before this old man could finish, the elder Wu of Shibai village sneered, Jianfeng, you don't have the right to talk about me, do you? You're acting like it's easy to get the position of elder Wu of Shibai village. Hee, Jimin, just pretend I didn't say anything. Anyway, it's the internal affairs of your Shibai village. I won't interfere. Even if the Shaman King is here, he won't interfere. The elder Wu of Shibai village shrunk his head and smiled wretchedly. Fine. Let's end this matter here. The three-armed venerable Wu said with an indifferent tone. This is the moment of life and death for Ming Mountains. Let's wait until these millet seeds have spread all over Ming Mountains, and the trillions of people of Ming Mountains have overcome this crisis. You are a citizen of Shibai village. No matter how big the matter is, it can't be bigger than this. Yes, Swan and I is absolutely right. Nothing is as important as this. Elder Wu of Huta village nodded and said, I wanted to mention it to Jimin because Xiao Mao sent the millet seed here and the bloodline of Shibai village has become weak. Since Jimin doesn't want to care about it, please just laugh it off. Shibai village's elder Wu snorted coldly to show his dissatisfaction. After that, 10 elders of Shibai village nodded their heads at Huta village's elder Wu, then turned into black winds and left the ancestral hall. At this moment, Shibai village's elder Wu's expression was much better than before. After all, he didn't have any intention of meddling in the affairs of Shibai village, and Xiao Mao's background was only related to a little maidservant of Shibai village. Even if it was spread out, it wouldn't be a big deal. Especially, Xiao Mao's bloodline of a great god was indeed very pure, which made him very interested. However, his interest was only limited to asking Xiao Mao a few questions. Then he also turned into a black wind and left. Jimin, all the shaman villages of your Shibai village are distributing the millet seeds in Hutu temple. Don't you want to go and have a look? Hutu village's elder Wu stopped him. No need. You have made the preparations, so I'll leave it to you. Shibai village's elder Wu didn't stop. His figure gradually disappeared, but his words were still lingering in the air. Ask Swan and IG to give me my share. Sigh. Looking at the disappearing black smoke, Hutu village's elder Wu sighed. In the entire ancestral shrine, only Hutu village's elder Wu, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao were left. Elder Wu frowned, as if he was thinking about something. Xiao Mao, on the other hand, had a joyful look on his face. In fact, he had never thought about the position of elder Wu. All he wanted was to find out where he came from. However, when he arrived in Ming Mountains, He was raised to the position of emperor by Bailu village's elder Wu and G-Man. The desire in his heart was ignited involuntarily. However, now that he had witnessed the incident at the Hutu stronghold and the abilities of the 12 shamans, he knew that he was nothing more than a little bug in their eyes. Even someone as strong as Xiao Hua could not put up any resistance, let alone him. Therefore, he had achieved his goal of coming to Ming Mountains, and he didn't have any regrets. In this ancestral shrine, the only one who was confused, depressed, and bored was naturally Xiao Hua. Although he stayed in the ancestral shrine, from the beginning to the end, all the shamans were speaking in Ming Mountain's shaman language. He couldn't understand it at all. Xiao Mao didn't dare to say anything. He was just like a log standing there. He might as well follow Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao and leave the ancestral shrine. Hee, big brother. Xiao Mao finally noticed Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, big brother. Little brother's matter has been settled." Hee, it's fine. Since you know where you come from, everything is easy, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Looking at that elder Wu from Shebi village, it seems like you don't have much relationship with him? Yes, Xiao Mao said with a smile. Little brother's mother is just a servant girl of G-Man from Shebi village. In his eyes, I'm just a nobody. Oh? Then why is Yu so hostile towards you? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Xiao Mao explained the whole story with a smile. Yu is just gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Little brother is just here to find out where he came from. How could he possibly threaten his position? On the contrary, because of him jumping up and down, he revealed the plan of the swordsman to Shebi village's Elder Wu. I'm sure Elder Wu will do something about it, right? That's strange. If it's like what you said, even if your mother knows the language of shamans, it's impossible. Xiao Hua was sharp enough to think of this. Xiao Mao shook his head slightly. Big brother. It's already like this. Little brother is already very satisfied. How could the Elder Wu not know about what big brother knows? Since they don't want to tell me, why should I ask? Sigh, Xiao Mao is right. The Hutu stronghold's Elder Wu said, the development of this matter has exceeded my expectations. The secrets of this matter are too deeply hidden. The identity of Xiao Mao's mother is a problem. The identity of Xiao Mao's father is also a problem. If we continue to investigate, that would be the matter of Shebi village. Judging from Jimin's reaction, he might not pay attention to it. After all, the disaster in Ming Mountains is the most serious. He can only think about other things after overcoming this crisis, right? Senior, little brother thanks you. Recalling what he saw just now, Xiao Mao knew that if it wasn't for Elder Wu from Huta Village's recommendation, he wouldn't have been able to meet the Elder Wu from 11 Shaman Village, and it would be even more impossible for him to learn about his background from Elder Wu from Shebi Village. Especially, according to what Patriarch Wu of Shebi Stronghold said, this might be a shameful incident of Shebi Stronghold. If he went to Shebi Stronghold recklessly, he would offend this Patriarch Wu and G-Man of Shebi Stronghold. Perhaps, before he could even get close to Shebi Stronghold, he would be killed in Ming Mountains. Therefore, Xiao Mao bowed and thanked Elder Wu sincerely. It's all right. Elder Wu from Shebi Village waved his hand and said, not to mention that little brother Xiao is your big brother. Just the fact that you have the bloodline of Ming Mountains in your veins is enough for me to lend you a hand. Senior, that Elder Wu from Bai and village will be fine, right? Xiao Mao had a good impression of Bai and village's Elder Wu, so he asked. Hee, nothing will happen, Elder Wu said with a smile. Changji pledged his loyalty to you because of your bloodline, not because of you. In Ming Mountains, pledging loyalty to a descendant of a great god is very normal, so Jimin won't punish Changji too much. Besides, Changji is very experienced in planting millet seeds. I think Jimin wants Changji to teach him how to plant them, right? After saying that, Elder Wu looked at Xiao Hua and asked, little brother Xiao, aren't you going to Wu Ming? Xiao Hua knew that this was Elder Wu's concern. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, let's wait a little longer. Not to mention that I haven't passed the obstacle of Ming Mountains. It's not appropriate for me to go there now. Even senior brother Li of the younger generation was eager to return home. I still have to escort them through Huan country and return to Shi country. All right. Seeing that Xiao Hua had made up his mind, Elder Wu nodded. If you're going there, you will have to pass by my Huda village. Other elders don't care about this, but I still recognize your kindness. Just come. Hee, I understand. Xiao Hua recalled the coldness of the 10 great elders and said with a smile, if I didn't come to Huda village to find you, I'm afraid I wouldn't even know where Wu Ming is. Isn't there? Elder Wu was stunned, thinking that Xiao Hua didn't know there was a route in the Witch King token. Big Brother has always been bad at directions. Xiao Mao laughed. If you let him find it himself, he will never find it. Ha ha ha. So that's how it is. Elder Wu also laughed and waved his hand. Let's go and see how the millet seeds are distributed. Once I'm done with the matters in the village, I'll personally send you off from Ming Mountains. Io, that won't do. I'm really scared. Xiao Hua knew that Elder Wu had a noble status and wouldn't leave the witch village easily. How could he let him personally send him off? Little brother Xiao, don't be so polite. While walking, Venerable Wu said, you've done a lot for Ming Mountains. If I don't even send you off, wouldn't that make the cultivators of Dao sect laugh at the people of Ming Mountains for not being civilized? Hee, all right. Thank you for your kindness. Xiao Hua suddenly thought of Yi Yu. Who knew what kind of tricks this guy would play on his way back? Of course, he wasn't afraid of leaving Ming Mountains. But within Ming Mountains, it was better to have Elder Wu accompany him. When the three of them came out, Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxiao were already waiting outside. They didn't ask anything and followed the three of them to Huda Palace. -11.